Okay, it's 1:03 p.m. on October 28th, 2022. I'm going to call the Grand County Budget Advisory Board meeting to order. Present, we've got Kevin Walker, Renee Baker, Gabe Wojtek, Chris Baird, Chris Kaufman on the board. We've also got August Graniff, the Economic Development Director. And first action item is approval of the October 21st minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the October 21st minutes as written.
Okay, so a second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Or corrections? All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 0. Absent currently is Shaylee Bryant and Mary McGann. Then first up is a review of the Economic Development Department budget. Switch screens. So we created, we're using an entirely new fund this year. Shaylee.
Hi guys, sorry.
The old budget was full of random accounts that it wasn't organized according to statutory expenditure requirements. So we built a new economic development fund. So this should make reporting much easier. Start off with the revenue side of things. Predominantly transient room tax funded. So these are according to our current projections for transient room tax. Total of $2,962,000. Then I split this out into the three statutory categories: tourism promotion, economic diversification, and then rec, film and conventions.
So just checking that 2.9 million is the 37%.
Yeah, so that's 30% of the total.
7.
And then diversification is 1/5 of that 37%. Rec film conventions is 1/3 of that 37%. And then what's that?
It's 1/5 for rec film, 1/3
Oh.
for diversification.
No, yeah, you're right. Sorry about that. And then the remainder, which is roughly 44%, is the tourism promotion. So 1.382 million for tourism promotion, about 987,000 for diversification, about 592,000 for rec film conventions. There's also a couple grants we've got plugged in. Rural County grant, 200,000, and cooperative marketing grant, 225,000. Any questions on revenue?
So what kind of assumptions are you making about just same as 2023, the same as 2022? So,
Yeah, no growth across from 1 year to the next, but I did revise my projections taking August into account because we crossed back into above average TRT collections for August. So that affected the end of year projection. And, we can continue to revise this, up until the end of the process when we approve the budget. But if we do see better collection rates, then it will affect the projection. And we give August the opportunity to go and plug more programming in if that happens. And I'm kind of expecting that to happen, but I'm not counting on it. So now we'll move on to, let's see. Let's tackle economic diversification first, August.
Okay.
You want to these are all new accounts, so there's not really any history with them.
Yeah.
But go ahead, August. The salaries, just I guess to point out, we've estimated that about 40% of some of the employee salaries are economic diversification related and 60% are tourism promotion related. So we've made that split in the accounting. So this is representing 40% of these positions. Is that right? Marcus?
I don't think we're missing anybody.
Okay.
And then
you're just
film
Film
is,
is in
film
it,
is just in film. Film is in rec film.
Yeah,
It's
film
not
is-
split.
Film is in its own department, or the rec film conventions department.
You're just assuming the same 40-60 split for all 5 employees.
No, that's based off of a department-wide average. So Renee and I put numbers together that have, this is total employee costs multiplied by that individual employee's priorities on economic diversification or tourism, and then that created a department-wide average. And that's for the 60/40,
Okay, but
But
we're
that's
using
not
it for
including the
each.
film commission.
not including.
Okay, but it looks like, I mean, I see 40% happening 5 times in this table, so.
Right, so but for the sake of getting those numbers into here, just taking the non-film total salary budget and multiplying by that department-wide average excluding film, gets those two split department-wide salary employee costs numbers.
Okay, so you're just assuming that the entire non-film department is spending 40% of its time.
That's not
That
what
might be
I'm assuming.
100% of Ben's time and 0% of Melissa's, for example.
It's just the,
Yeah,
the average.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, but when you put it in the table,
I mean, we could, if you have, more specific, we could do it by individual if you wanted to.
Yep.
I mean,
We have-
if it comes out the same, I don't want to make a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
fuss, but just seem to.
Yeah.
Yep,
I just did it this way, so. I mean, it's gonna be the simpler way to do it. Renee's gonna have to make these split allocations when she does payroll, so it might make it a little easier.
because it's really just an accounting exercise rather than a.
Well, I mean, it does affect, the
No,
other,
no, no, you're right.
what the remainder of the funding.
Yeah.
But, it's based off of, tracking actual hours spent, right? Okay, so there's that. So let's go down to the line items.
In terms of talking about big picture strategy and any of like the prioritizing some expenditures, is that a good time to talk about that, or should I just go through line by line? What's in there?
Well, let's do both.
Okay, all right. So a lot of these expenses where it says kind of economic development general, there's a lot of expenses in our department that aren't necessarily attributable directly to tourism promotion or economic diversification or film. A good example is like we just got a new vehicle, so that vehicle lease is going to be used across the department. And Chris and I are trying to figure out how do we account for that equitably with that same kind of 60/40 split. We basically kind of, or I took a look at those general expenses and just put them in each fund about in that 60/40 split. So some of these things that are over here could just as well be in the tourism promotion bucket. But in order to try to split those general expenses, that's kind of just how they ended up landing. So examples are the vehicle fuel, vehicle lease, the staff engagement, that's kind of just having money for more culture development in our office, cell phone allowance, community engagement. So that's having meetings about policy and programming, round tables, and the market and all that kind of stuff. And then inventory in terms of technology. We want to buy an owl for our office because we steal this one all the time, and having some contingency for in case one of our computers fails during the year. That's all the ones that are labeled TE general. There's a handful of smaller expenditures. There's a membership line that goes towards IEDC and EDC Utah. EDC Utah is an Economic Development Corporation of Utah we're a member of. IEDC is a membership organization of economic development organizations throughout the country and internationally. That we went to a conference for this year and provides a lot of good information for our staff in terms of best practices within the space. As we move down, we have program marketing. So there's 45 grand in there. We're currently working with some video production companies to help tell the story of some of this diversification programming that we're creating. If you're looking at our STAR grant program, for example, it's not very compelling to say that we had 40 people and they got this much money. We're trying to create better pieces of media that engage the average person in a way so that they understand the value of the impact of these programs that we're creating. When we have our Let's Business Summit, when we're engaging with legislators, trying to tell those stories more effectively. So we have some money this year that we're spending on that. We want to continue that effort next year. Kind of see that as part of the lobbying effort in addition to just community education. We've got the SBDC contribution that the commission just signed, approved. So we're in a 3-year agreement where we're going to contribute up to $100,000 to offset the cost of them hiring a Grand County specific small business development center director at the USU campus to be advised and hired by the USU SBDC director, Dennis Blanding. We're collaborating very closely with them. I'm very excited about that position. Scrolling down, we've got some conference travel is what's under that 4,000 number. We're going to try to continue the STAR grant. We have a lesser amount than last year. We budgeted $500,000 last year, so we put in. We ended up not having quite as much to work with, so that's a $400,000 line right now. Workforce development ended up getting chopped a little bit, but that's a big priority that came out of Travel Council and the Economic Development Advisory Board is investing some more time the way that Ben has into developing these grant programs, into relationships with the school, with the USU, with local businesses to try to do apprenticeships and workforce analyses and try to connect our workforce to our businesses and connect those resources there. New program development. If you go to professional services, 310, there's a breakdown of a couple things. Administrative services is one of the general expenses. It's my understanding it's an offset to the general fund for audit expenses. Is that right, Chris?
No, not audits, for payroll and accounting.
Okay.
So the general fund pays for your payroll, accounting, all the overhead, administrative.
Yeah.
So this is reimbursement to the general fund for that.
Yep. And then we have a $100,000 line for strategic planning here. Maybe that's a good time to talk about strategy for next kind of 2 years. A big part of all the conversations I've been having with folks and on my advisory boards is, we have this deadline for the diversification piece of TRT in 2026, if I'm not mistaken, and that there's a finite amount of time for us to spend this money. And so wanting to make sure that we're doing some community engagement, some planning so that we have a really clear 3-year action plan to kind of get to that point and then have like a 2-year plan beyond that so that when we go to the legislature and say, here's all these amazing things that we did, not only in economic diversification, but also with our smaller budget on the tourism side. We really think it would be good if you let us continue to use this money. And we have a roadmap for the next 2 years beyond this kind of expiration date. So there's also some planning money coming out of the promotion side because that strategic planning process, I want that to encapsulate some sustainable tourism goals as well as economic diversification into this kind of holistic economic development that's community centered, that gives buy-in on the community and businesses and various stakeholders. That's everything here. So basically main takeaways is there's a little bit less money for STAR grant than last year, a little less money for workforce development than this year, although we didn't really get that off the ground. The SBDC contribution is concrete and is going to happen. And planning is going to be a big priority for next year. So that's kind of the main gist over on this side. Maybe we do rec film conventions. Unless there's any
Well, does
questions.
anybody have any questions on the economic diversification before we move on?
Again, what is this side, what is the percentage?
So this is, it's
1/3 of.
it's 1/3 of 37%. So basically, it's 1/3 of 37%, there's 1/5 of 37%, which is the rec film conventions, and the tourism is the balance, which ends up being 44%.
It's about 44%, I think.
So the total, this ends up being like 12% of the total TRT collections. If you do like 1/3 times 37%.
Usually for inventory, on the inventory line, usually, we just put in like concrete expected expenses rather than contingencies. Was that a recommendation given by Matt? To put that
Yeah.
in there?
Okay, because we had nothing budgeted, we had no inventory cost budget this year, we replaced almost all of our computers this year. He recommended that we put some money in there in case we had a failure. And he quotes laptop costs are about $1,200 and desktops are 1,000, so I don't know, 1,200.
Well, if it gets, near the end of the year, and you didn't need that, you could reallocate it to some other line item. All right. Now moving on to the rec conventions budget. So this is kind of a combination of film commission and some other things. So this has salary and benefits. Some of the other line
Sure.
items associated with film commission.
Yep, so there are some membership costs associated with the Film Commission, and Motion Picture Association this, and Association of Film Commissioners International that. They're broken down by line item there, in a worksheet. The Film Commissioner has to do a lot of travel, whether locally or beyond, so the vehicle fuel costs and the travel expenses there amount to about 10 grand total. The Commission also does a lot of merchandise, whether that's crew appreciation, like hats and stuff like that, or giveaways at Sundance, all that kind of stuff. That's a decent part of the budget there. There's some software expenses. There's I'll break that out. Nothing crazy. One of them is a Scout software that basically has all these locations that lives on the website. It's a Creative Cloud subscription. Wix web hosting fee. Some of those got zeroed out, I'm noticing.
I didn't do it.
I might have not pressed 1 of the quantity. But
Well, you're out of money though.
Okay. So we'll hold up, we'll deal with that later.
I mean, we could move money around.
Yeah.
If you accidentally didn't put the 1 in.
yeah, I would say that we do that some other time. Do we have to do that now?
No, I mean, we can make corrections as long as this total number stays the same. That's
Okay.
the amount we have to work with. So,
Fair enough.
so you might have to pull.
Something from somewhere else.
I mean, thus far, I think we've charged about 25,000 to the current film commission's line item.
Yeah.
And so, through the end of the year, another 10,000, seems like it'd be more than enough to cover it. So it might be, 35,000 is what we budgeted above and beyond the salary and benefits for the film commission. That might possibly be more than is needed.
So again, some of these are, I'll go with the rest of it. There's a cell phone for the film commissioner that gets paid. Community events down below the $7,600 number, $6,500 of that is for a film making competition. And then there's some funds in there for screenings in the parks that the film commission puts on. And then there's a line in here for familiarization, as she does a lot of scouting with potential production companies that are interested in movies, commercials, etc. Having some money to show them around town is really essential. And I think that's everything for film, and everything else on here is going other places.
Okay. I can carry the rest of them. So we made a commitment to the Recreation Special Service District for youth recreation at 137,000. That's to help with their recreation related grant program, and then they also have an accelerated youth sports program. So that covers those costs. Then we've got the contribution to the Responsible Recreation Program, and this is for sort of non-advertising related expenses for like trail ambassadors, those kinds of things. 231,402 salaries for the trail ambassadors. Then a few years ago, a couple years ago, anyway, we committed to the city pay for the pilot transit shuttle program in the city, and so that's that, our portion of that contribution. And we were doing some event funding out of this pot of money, but we really don't have enough. So I think, I don't know really what the distinction was, quite honestly, between this event funding and the other event funding. So I think we're just gonna have to consolidate all the event funding into the tourism promotion.
I can speak to that.
And that's it for the rec film convention budget. Any questions before we move on? All right. And on to the big one, the tourism promotion. So again, I got 60% of those 5 employees' salary posted to this department.
And that now includes the special event coordinator.
Oh, yeah, plus 100% of the special event coordinator salary. Okay, want to just start rolling down these line items?
Sure. So again, the ones that are demarcated as the kind of EDD general are those expenses that are for, the office at large and have been kind of divvied up according to that 60-40 split. In this travel budget, there's also some tourism specific travel expenses. So this has a lot of pretty much everything that I went to or plan to go to this year, including some things that I wasn't able to go to, or Melissa or otherwise. Utah Association of Counties Spring and Fall Conference, the Governor's One Utah Summit. I zeroed up the one he has in Salt Lake because I just started running out of money. So just prioritizing the one in Cedar. The Utah Tourism Conference held up in Vernal this year. Tourism Day on the Hill, a very cheap one. The DMA West Leadership Summit. DMA West is the Destination Marketing Association of the West. So it's basically people who do this job in similar communities throughout the Western region and get together and learn best practices from each other. And then I usually wouldn't plan to go to the Technology Summit, but it's in Salt Lake this year. So it's super easy, fairly cheap. It probably cost me less than that to go. The Outdoor Recreation Summit is the state's outdoor Office of Outdoor Recreation, which is a grant making organization that does a lot with outdoor recreation in the state. They typically have 2, so just planning to go to one of these, and then zeroed out ESTO, which is a national destination marketing conference, and some unanticipated costs that I wanted to budget for, but didn't have money, so zeroed that out as well. The office supplies is based off of a 5-year running average of what we spent on office supplies. So $2,000 is kind of an estimate of things that we might need, covering paper, dry erase markers, whiteboards, that kind of stuff. Admin services, as discussed before, went over to the other budget. These are utility expenses calculated by doing average bills over the last couple of years. Just annualizing those, so it covers our water, sewer, garbage, electricity, gas, phone, internet for the whole department. There's a small insurance coverage for Utah Local Government Trusts. Yeah, so if we catch, my understanding is if we catch fire, everything inside of it we get paid back or something,
Or get bombed.
or we get bombed. Oh, I'm just kidding.
That's what we gotta,
Good way to go.
we gotta change the signs. Be more covert. Okay, under equipment lease, there are 2 line items. We have basically a copy printer that we have a maintenance agreement on from Les Olson, about $1,000 a year. And then we lease a postage machine that costs about $4,000 a year that automatically puts postage on all the travel planners that we ship out on an annual basis.
Professional services.
Yeah, so this contains software as well as some consulting services that I'll discuss. So we have a CRM that's very cheap that helps us manage all of our business information in one place.
So what does that stand for?
Customer resource management.
typically. So for us, it's if I'm looking up who currently is the owner of the Gonzo, I need to get in touch with them. I have that in one place instead of like, hey, Jana, who has the business license information over there? And then we create notes basically after we have conversations and meetings with folks in the community. Helps us keep track of our engagement with businesses locally. Super cheap for that software class. Townfolio is our efforts to put more of the data that we pay for into the public's hands, as well as have a community profile. So they basically take all the publicly available census data for our area, and then we put in custom data such as our visitation and those kinds of numbers that we have. We're working with them currently to get that operational and on our site. We started working with them this year. We'll probably work with them for the next couple. We have 2 Adobe Creative Cloud subscriptions for Melissa and Robert for Photoshop and Illustrator and all that good stuff. CrowdRiff is a contract that we had when I came into the office. It amounts to a little under 20 grand there. It's basically a software that pulls user-generated content from social media so that we can repurpose it for our social media for any online campaigns. And Melissa uses that for the most part. But we're contracted with them for I think until next June. So have to pay for that no matter what. Wander Maps is a new.
So why is the quantity for? Is it quarterly or something?
Yeah. Wander Maps, we approved this year. Basically, we're putting together a destination map that's digital, that's interactive, and that we control the information on. The idea being that if someone goes to the mountain biking page on our website, they can view all of the mountain biking trails interactively, and when they click on a trail, they'll have all of our best kind of responsible recreation information in one place, rather than Googling Amasabak trails and then All Trails says this is a easy trail system for no one has any problems with ever. And then they get injured and SAR has to go get them. But that's saying that. Bandwingo is something we zeroed out. It's something I'd like to consider in the future if we had more budget. It's basically a software program where you can create like tours or like basically little itineraries in your town. So like the classic one is like a group hub tour. And you incentivize people to actually go and engage in your community in certain ways. So like what I was going to consider this year was like an art trails thing, so that we actually get people to go to all of the sculptures on the art trails tour, check them out, and then, oh, look, across the street is this restaurant that you can go visit and spend your money at. And then you get a discount because you did it this way. We haven't worked with them before, but a lot of other destination management organizations really like the software. But I had to cut some stuff, and that was new, so I cut it for now. Short-term rental ID and monitoring. So this pays for software that we've had in the past and that I've kind of put on the back burner, not due to lack of desire, but just other competing priorities. But want to still have money in for it so that we have a good idea of how many short-term rentals are actually operating in our market. Are they compliant with our rules and monitoring their activity? It's been identified as a priority by a number of folks. MailChimp is just an email marketing communication platform that's relatively inexpensive. And then these last two, I kind of vaguely labeled it data insight management, but basically, we have all this data, but we don't really have staff or consulting capacity to like turn it into really useful reports on a regular basis. So in the past, we've contracted with Love Communications. They have a really good data science team, and whether it's them or someone else or staff, just wanted to create a line item that could capture, the ability to pay for deliverables such as here's a monthly insight report as to what's happening, in your region and in your local economy, so we can distribute that to our local businesses and make better decisions based off of the data we already have. Because Ben tries his best to kind of put that numbers together right now, but we just don't have the manpower to do that really effectively. The last one is some visitation research that we've started with Wayne Freeman at USU this year. We don't really have a good idea what our visitation numbers are. We have all these proxy numbers, who visits national park this, who visits state park there. But we don't have the one golden number where you can say this is like a really good number of how many visitors actually came to the Moab area across all of these different platforms, and actually ground truth that with like all of the data we have on the ground. So we'd like to continue that research. There's this permits and leases category. Basically, like we have some billboards that we own, but it's on BLM, so occasionally we have to renew a permit or lease on those. We spent some money on that to pay for some variable messaging signs for timed entry this year to UDOT. So it's a pretty marginal expense, but want to have some money in there for it. This is some membership dues. I zeroed a fair amount of these out. U.S. Travel Association, this has been a member of, and is kind of not required, but it makes it cheaper for us to participate in the biggest tourism conference of the year, IPW, which is really the only one I left in here after cutting some things. DMA West I spoke about before. Global Sustainable Tourism Council is something that we've been a member of in the past, but we're not actively doing anything with them, so I zeroed that out for now. Utah Tourism Industry Association, we are a member of. We attend a lot of their events, and it's helpful to be a member, to be a part of those conversations sometimes. And then these other organizations, did IITA still in there? Yeah, IITA is the International Inbound Travel Association, and they run a conference every year that Melissa's planning to go to. We're staying a member there. NCA is like a bus tour association that we don't really active in, so I zeroed out that. The National Parks Conservation Association is kind of just a donation. We were tight, so I zeroed that out. And Grand Circle, it's an organization that of all of these destinations that are in what's called like the Grand Circle of the West, that kind of goes to all these Southwest national parks.
Then we've got this contribution to the advertising side of responsible recreation program. So this would be the elements of messaging, and also any some portions of the salaries associated with producing and getting that messaging out over the Trail Ambassador Program, Responsible Recreation Program.
And that's new. We haven't contributed to that side in the past.
We've got community engagement. Got there. So here's where we move some of the stuff like art trails and
Yeah, so
community grant program.
they requested $5,000 from us, Art Trails. I was just running out of places of things to cut, so I brought that down a little bit. So we're making a contribution to Art Trails, but not as significant as we have in the past. This is where the community grant ended up. So the thought is that how can we provide some more community events with our TRT revenues? This year we were planning to support, for example, the community rebuilds Haunted Bunkhouse, which is not only going to provide a fun, family-friendly, Halloween adventure for kids, but also help them raise money for affordable housing locally. So we tried to maintain some money in there for next year.
Got the mid contribution. This actually looks like it's gone.
Well, it includes a
Oh.
couple things.
Oh, okay.
So there's typically 2 line items that I just put into this one. So last year we provided a personnel cost offset of $38,000. And then there's a bathroom hours extension. We're working out some agreements to make sure that this is all lined up, but this is about what we've provided in the past to ensure that the MIC's able to operate and that there are publicly available bathrooms on Main Street, which if this doesn't happen, otherwise there's not. And then we had put some money in here for technology upgrades to help support some of our visitor education mission, whether it's for the HB 180 UTV, licensing, or our kind of Moab Steward best practices programs we're developing with GCAT, whether that is to get a TV in there or some iPads and stuff like that. But maybe a future priority. So that got zeroed out as I had to cut some things.
Yeah, and some of these, like I say, as we progress, I'll probably get at least one more month of data in, and if the TRT is still looking, fairly strong, like it came in August, then, it might bump up that projection,
Okay.
add some of
Some of
this
these
stuff
stuff
back in.
Okay.
Just to make sure the public is aware, MIC is Moab Information Center.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks.
Chris, when you say strong, this is compared to your trend line, compared to 2021, what's your spin?
Compared to my trend line.
Cool.
It didn't- Yeah, it had, the only time that TRT got above 2021.
Okay, one thing that got cut significantly was a special event grant. We had about 55 grand in there this year. For places to trim the budget, this ended up being one of them. So continuing to have a special event grant program, but significantly smaller at $10,000 a year.
So, of note also that we are just about to take delivery of that big mobile stage. which
Very
we
good
can
point.
Provide to, to the community. So, in some regard, we're kind of reducing these grants, but if somebody, is in need of stage, then there's some compensation there. for
Yep.
sure.
Well, I think that was part of the conversation when we were talking with the folk festival or the free concert series specifically about what we were providing them with costs offsetting. And it was that they had, cost them whatever, 10 grand per a pop to get the stage down from Salt Lake. So if we have our own, that'll be cheaper for them to operate than any other stage type.
So the suggestion is that line is being reduced, but we're making contributions through
In kind, basically.
the stage use.
Yeah, we haven't really established there's going to be a fee for the stage, but if there is, it's going to be much, much less than what they're paying to rent it from Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Chris, could you scroll down? I'm just curious how much is left on the list. Scroll bar that's on the right.
How much is left?
How many line items I'm not seeing on the screen?
Oh, there you
So I was curious. Okay, thanks.
Not that much more.
Some of them we aren't using at the moment.
Okay, the Moab grant, so there's a zero in there, so that's we created this new grant this year, the Marketing Our Awesome Businesses grant, trying to provide some marketing funds to small tourism businesses. The program went mediumly well. Ben was optimistic that it could have been improved next year. He would have recommended that we fund it, but at a lesser number. But on net, looking at all of the priorities, and considering that we're providing recent significant funding for the STAR grant and other business supports, that ended up on the chopping block for next year at the moment, so long as we don't get more money. There's some data subscriptions we could go through. So STR Lodging Data, so that's a provider of traditional lodging, occupancy, and revenue data for the market as a whole. Costs a little under $5 grand a year. Visa Destination Insights provides Visa credit card spend data on an annual or for the same kind of idea, but representing 60% of the market or so. Short-term rental data is kind of the same thing as the lodging data, but for newer, for the Airbnbs of the world. Part of me is trying to figure out a way, if we're already doing short-term rental activity monitoring through a different software, if we can get the same data as this data, just through different providers, but I haven't confirmed that at this point. So I think that's important for us to understand how both sides of the lodging economy is functioning. There's two pieces in here that got zeroed. So mobile visitation data is something that I was really excited about to help do like special event analyses and supplement some of that visitation data. It's basically this company called Placer that has agreements with all these different apps that have to have mobile services, mobile location data on in order to operate. So they're not as subject to all of the privacy concerns that are facing all of our geolocation data across the marketing world. So when you're talking about geolocation data, there's a lot of vendors who are like falling apart because they don't have good panels, but they have their own panel. Anyway, it would be good. This is kind of the best geolocation data available, but it ended up kind of on the block at the moment. And Adara is basically a data set that helps us understand the impact of our marketing. So rather than putting it here, it's just in our marketing spend, and Love, it's a part of the budget when we work with Love to do paid media, is that they basically take that license themselves. So I've zeroed that out on our side here. Only a couple more now.
So yeah, some training.
So small amount of training, had to kind of keep that low. Paid media is obviously a focus. So we have a co-op fly market campaign that we have launched, and we've received grant funding for next year. So we're, that money is basically already contracted in a way.
So
It's not really,
this, so this is our match. The
This is
total is
our
gonna be
match.
500,000 altogether.
a little
Yeah.
like 450, but yeah.
So we'll get to the other portion, but,
Yeah, and that comes in from the other revenue line.
so this is our match to it.
That's our match to it. We're definitely gonna do that campaign. If you look at I call it additional steady drip marketing, a goal for next year for me would be because that campaign's only gonna go through March, is to basically use a lot of the creative that we've already created for this kind of drive market campaign this year to say, okay, if we had 50 grand, can we distribute some of our marketing and just kind of stay consistent but targeted throughout the year so we have some continual presence. But again, I had to find places to cut, so that's zeroed out for now, but that's a place that I would increase if I found additional money.
So Chris, on the co-op fly marketing campaign, don't you usually like to make that 450 and then add 225 in revenue? Is that-
The other side of it's later. We'll get to that. So it's split out into two portions. I wanted to track the non-TRT, because one of the problems I was running into with doing these TRT reports is that the non-TRT grant money was mixed in with everything, and I couldn't easily separate out what was specific.
Makes sense.
So there's another, the very final, the non-TRT related expense department is where the other half of that expenditure is, that's non-TRT money.
Cool. Okay, the rest on here is billboards. So the top three we already are under contract for. So there's the Billboard North by the North Maverick. That's $6,600 a year. There's the South Maverick we just renewed a contract with, which is $12,000 a year. It's bigger, but I don't know if it's, that's it. There's a Fruita billboard that costs us $4,800 a year. I put in, there's about $4 grand for billboard maintenance. So that's, if we're changing what's on there, it costs a little over $1,000 to get out at one time, basically, with the folks that Robert has worked with in the past. And then, one of the strategy ideas I had talked with Patty about was, when we use that Fruita billboard and maybe get another billboard in the Helper Wellington area, that's kind of like an hour before you get into town, while you still have service that says like, board in your last hour of driving to Moab, like listen to this podcast, it'll give you all of this really good information on responsible recreation, what we're facing, and kind of as we're trying to figure out ways to get people to digest long form, really good information about how to be good visitors when the average attention span is like 8 seconds. That was one of the ideas we had. But for now, it's a cost we're not required to do, so I zeroed that out for now as well. We do have that Fruita billboard we could try that out with from the Denver side.
Okay. And
So there is
earned media, what is that?
So earned media, it's just basically a different word for the FAM tour that we've talked about much internally, but basically hosting. In our case, we don't really have any programs where we develop this, but the Utah Office of Tourism will often put together media trips for folks who are like a UK Cycling Magazine, for example, who's doing a Southern Utah tour, and they need like support, hosting a dinner while they're here, or paying for a hotel room or something like that. It's something we didn't have money in the budget last year for, and as we were trying to partner with the State Office of Tourism on this, just kind of again and again became a point of contention because we could support those missions. I think that it's worth discussing this in more detail.
Well, I mean, the issue, I think, is that can't control what they're gonna write about law. So the most damaging articles have been a result of the privatization program. You know, like that big article that came out several years ago and outside that said the lawless Wild West, a great place to come and do whatever you want. There's no rules. We paid for that.
Sure.
So, you know, I'm just saying, like, I'm not psyched about that at all.
I know. And I think that I wanted to put it in here because, you know, as I've talked to the folks who work in that space, obviously you can't, you know, force a journalist to write a,
Well, if you're paying them, why not? I mean, how is it ethical to pay journalists to write about? I just don't.
Is
It's
that
not
what-
it's considered an ad, but you can still,
yeah, I
Have
mean,
an ad
basically
fee.
the,
it looks like a
it's a
article.
very common practice.
It
And we
is.
should be able to say what's in it.
And I'm happy to talk about that.
So, but this, what's the money actually spent for?
It's typically
Like create,
support for like lodging, or like they're in town and we're like, we want you to do this type of activity to drive them to write about the kind of things that we want them
okay,
to
so you're
write about.
paying for their lodging and their activities. Is that what it amounts to?
Basically, it's a fairly, yeah, that's basically all it is. Or it's like they're coming for dinner and.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like I told you email the other day, like if we can get a commitment, all of our advertising policy
Yeah.
and what they write, then fine.
Yeah.
But if not, then.
But is the, I mean, are these, suppose we didn't have that budget item, would they be coming anyway with no input from us, or would they just? be writing
Well, and I
article
think that
about the
that's,
same
that would be
stories?
my argument, is a lot of these folks are coming here via, like, we're not pursuing any of this work, like, this is not like we're going after journalists, but the State Office of Tourism has a really robust program where they're within their Forever Mighty Red Emerald initiative, trying to drive the type of narrative that I think we're aligned with, which is that, you know, visit with, you know, respect and responsibility, spending your money in the community, and all of kind of that quality visitation type of priority, looking at particular outlets that drive that kind of a media and that kind of a market. And maybe they're doing like a 4-county thing and they're reaching out to us to say, can we support this spot? And if it's zero and we keep saying no, then that's what it is. But it has felt operationally constraining to not be able to have at least like a marginal amount of money to support that, as the state is putting a lot of support into our area.
I guess my feeling is it maybe does make sense to engage. I don't think it's practical to ask for.
Well, if they're
editorial
gonna
control.
come there anyway, then why are we paying for it?
I guess I would say,
We get more face time with them if we. pay
yeah,
stuff.
I think that's my point, is that it gives us an opportunity to get in front of them and say, hey, these are the challenges that we're facing. And like, obviously, we're not going to be able to like copy edit their report that they write, but we can say, these are our priorities. And
Well,
that
are you sure they won't be able to? Have you even asked?
I have not, again, we haven't had any money, so we haven't engaged in this.
Yeah, well, I guess my suggestion is just to ask, you know.
But I think that like saying, hey, this is our ad policy, this is where we're at, this is what our strategy is, like, is that something that aligns with what you're trying to write in this thing?
Well, I'm sure that issue's come up before, so you could ask around with other people in similar towns to see what's the best we can do in terms of influencing.
Yeah.
Content.
And I think that's what the state has said, is like, they're not gonna drive anybody our direction who they don't believe is aligned with like what we've told them we want.
Well, Melissa just said that one just came through that she was upset with just this year.
Well, yes, that person from Germany was a pain in the butt, but she wrote a good
That's
article
fair.
at the end of the day. She had a teenager with it, and she was rude to Melissa, but yes, fair point. Anyway, it's a relatively small part of the budget at large. I think would help us in front of those folks. Okay. Anyway,
Owned media.
Good discussion. Thank you.
yeah, thanks, Gabe. So in the past, this department has really only driven resources towards paid media, period. And, you know, as we're having a more complex and nuanced narrative about, you know, whereas in the past, you put a delicate arch on a poster and you put accelerant on it and it goes everywhere and everybody's like, oh, cool. But, you know, we're trying to have a much more different story about what visiting Moab is like, what we're asking of visitors, the kinds of behaviors we're looking for, the type of visit we're looking for. and that our owned media, so that's social media, blogs, video, podcasts, etc., is a really good opportunity to kind of completely control the narrative. So the money in here, I would say, for social media, podcasts written, is basically so that we can work with like freelance media journalists, ideally locals. Like my focus would be like, we have so many social media literate locals who, if we engage them for like $1,000 to go do a story or some social media posts about like wagbags or something like that, that they could do something that is aligned with current trends, that we're driving money to our local community. It's really good piece of narrative, and then it just gives us more content in general. And then the bigger piece here is, having some money towards this Keystone Moab Stewart video. So that's kind of hard to explain without zooming out big picture on some strategy, which is basically that, next year, in terms of what us and GCAD have been talking about, is that we want to start the kind of first 6 months doing a lot of strategy development around, what does our sustainable tourism and economic diversification strategy look like, and having some kind of branding experts sitting in on that whole process, so that coming out of that, we get that kind of new brand identity that's aligned with our community values as they've changed over time, and then build out this new educational platform that's very similar to kind of how the Avalanche Center has done their education platform, and basically make our future paid media strategy around putting together this Keystone video that kind of has the best cinematography around, the best athletes, all the locals, and it's really tugging at the hearts and minds of visitors in a way we haven't done in the past. That says, like, you should visit with an ethic, and here's how. And putting paid media behind that, getting them to an educational platform, and then driving visitation via this filter of education, basically. And so that's going to be a big expense, is that video. We don't really have budget to right now pay for that right now, but put some pre-production costs into that, so that once the kind of planning branding process is complete, we're ready to start on that process next year. And then the idea would be that rolling into 2024, that everybody's on the same page. We have all of this stuff developed, and we're ready to kind of really launch in an external facing way. Yeah. And there's some more line items that kind of speak to that here below.
Okay, content development. All right. Postage for travel planners.
Yep, so that's like about our annual postage that we spend on shipping travel planners.
So
There's only one in here, which is IPW. It's kind of like, it's a big expensive show, but it's like everyone in the world is there. So it's our opportunity to share what our kind of new identity is and what Moab is all about as it's changing over time. There was some international trade sales missions that Melissa went on this year and is going to go on this year. But in terms of cutting the budget, those kind of fell by the wayside for next year. So there's a zero line under international sales missions. 5,000 for merchandise. So that's, getting all of the swag that we bring to shows that we share with our partners. Relatively consistent with what we spent on annual basis in the past. There's 20,000 printed materials to print the existing travel planners. Robert thinks we'll run out in February, so that'll get us like through most of next year. We don't want to spend too much on that as we go through the strategy and branding process. We're going to have new visual language and everything and content, so don't want to spend too much on that. Creative services kind of encapsulates what I was speaking to, so that brand planning piece and having general creative services. So that would go to a creative agency that would, right now we're using Love for the creative piece. So it could go to Love, it could go to somebody else that would basically be embedded in our community strategic planning process. And that, when they start to feel like, okay, this is what the new look and the new feel and the identity of this destination and community feels like, we're going to go implement that in parallel. And then there's some money in creative services to tweak the ads that we already have in place in the next year. But the rest would basically go towards that, brand planning and beyond process.
Would that brand planning be pretty specific to the travel council, or could it be leveraged to sort of countywide brand planning, or?
I mean, I would see that very specifically focused on like this Discover Moab Grant County Economic Development like thing. Who are we as a community at large, and how do we speak to not only our residents, but to our visitors and all of our marketing and planning and that like, I think it's less county corporation focused and much more like destination and community identity. But outcomes would be new logos, fonts, visual things, website skins, travel council stuff, all of that. But if they're a good agency and the county feels like they need to do something, maybe there's an additional fee that they can throw on while they're already here. That could come from somewhere else.
And then sort of same area, but kind of a different topic. The commission has sort of expressed a desire to utilize local artistic talent whenever possible. Do you see that somehow fitting into the budget?
Something that could be, well, General Creative Services is open enough. We are planning to work with a local to redesign we are in the process of the billboards we have right now, so that they speak to some of these respectable neighborhoods as you're visiting town. Messaging that we've been asked to put forward. What I would love to see is like some kind of a partnership where they're bringing their industry knowledge and big picture perspective, and we're connecting them with like, hey, listen, this is like a roster of 10 awesome local artists. Come up with a way to integrate them into this whole thing, into our future planning and future creative across the board. But have them kind of like manage that process. I think that's the hard part is, we have the numbers of 10 local artists and like, hey, can you work on this thing or that thing? The coordination ends up being expensive. Okay, lastly, there's the tourism component of strategic planning. So that is, as we're trying to develop this kind of more, how do we have a comprehensive way forward that's really focused for the next 3 to 5 years, but also kind of speaks to the bigger picture vision and something that we can refer to as we're making decisions going forward. And then lastly, put 10,000 in here for some website costs. If we get to a point next year where we do want to create kind of like this Moab Steward educational cascade embedded video module on the website that we can start driving people to engage in paid marketing. And that's that.
Okay. Questions on the tourism promotion department?
Yeah, I have a few. So my notes.
I'll be right back. Carry on.
So I think in last year's budgeting and again, in recent conversations, I think that survey that Lowe's did a couple of years ago that Elaine initiated was really useful. And I'd like to see more things like that,
Yeah.
variations. Is that already in here somewhere? I didn't.
So the closest thing would be like data insight management, which was under professional services, and or the research lane from USU. That's kind of like, it's not exactly clear. Well, it's not defined what those deliverables are. I mean, what I definitely want is more understanding of our visitor economy, not only for policymakers, but also for our community at large. So I'm agnostic as to exactly what that.
So what are the size of those line items?
They're 20 grand each. I'd like them to be bigger, but I just couldn't find a way to make that work across everything.
We've got a lot of accumulated, we've got the fund balance.
Yeah.
And I think that would be an appropriate use.
I think there's a lot of
Fund
things in
balance.
here. I would say let's put fund balance. But so that's a really good point. I think that like.
Yeah, anyway, I'd like to see a robust, I mean, I'd like us to err on the too much rather than too little side in terms of surveying attitudes.
Yeah.
And if it means taking money out of the fund balance, I think it's a big use for it.
Something I think would be really useful is like an ongoing data set of resident business and visitor attitudes, basically,
Yeah.
that we have as a data set over time, monthly or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can discuss the details later, but I think the first step is to
Cool.
get something in the budget. And,
Yeah.
and I think the budget also focuses some kind of, policy directive, like we stick something in the budget, and we're hoping you will find time to make it happen.
Yep. Yeah.
So maybe I should repeat all
Well,
that when Chris gets back.
Well, that too, but if you could send us an email as well.
So Chris, while you were out, I was saying that I'd like to see more survey of, resident attitudes, visitor attitudes, since that kind of thing, similar to the study Loves did a while ago. I don't think there's a whole lot of money in here currently for that kind of thing, but it seems to me that would be appropriate to fund that through the fund balance. I'm assuming this isn't taking anything out of the fund balance currently,
It's not.
and we do have fund
I need
balance.
to kind of calculate, because we're gonna, we drew a lot out of fund balance this year.
Mhm.
And so I haven't really fully calculated what's gonna be left. And so,
You have a rough idea, is it more than $1 million, or less than $1 million?
well, there's 3.5 million in there. We started off budgeting to take about 450, and we added another. how much did
Well,
we
the
add?
flood relief grant was from reserves, wasn't it?
Yeah,
So that was 250 total. I don't know if we're gonna spend all of that, and then it was, yeah, 450.
So it sounds like we've got at least $2 million.
no, but we also did the 500,000 for the,
Yeah, okay, so it's about $1.2 million is what we took out.
yeah, 1.2 million plus 450.
It's slightly under $2 million.
The 450 would have been plus the 500,000. It would have been 450 for marketing, 500,000 for Star Grant, 250 for flood.
So we started off though at 450. That was the balance on the responsible grant.
Okay,
And then we added 1.2 million.
it'd be more like 2 million was taken out this year.
So, well, 1,650,000. So we kind of cut the fund balance about in half.
Okay, so it's
I mean, we still have another 500,000 we can draw out and still be fine from a cash flow perspective.
I mean, I think these surveys are more like $50,000 expenses. So,
Yeah, I think, the tentative budget, which we're gonna, make a motion on today is really just like the first full draft. And then November is the time when we come back and say, all right, what do we want to do to tweak it? It's ideal to have the budget as done as possible 10 days before the public hearing in December, which is December 6th. Because that's when I have to have it ready for the public to view. And you can still change it all the way up until the end of the year, December 31, but I like to have things nailed down as much as possible when we put it out for the public hearing. And so we have, 3/4 of November to continue with workshops, which I'm going to propose that with the commission. May is needed. It depends on how things go. At the end here, I'll kind of start going over where we're at bottom line wise. So I think that there's a lot of big decisions that are going to need to be made in November also. But these smaller things will be, tracked also.
yeah, I mean, I'd be inclined to stick something in now. And, I think we are going to have to reexamine, as you say, between the tentative budget and getting to the final. But sometimes these things fall by the wayside. And so my vote would be to stick something in the budget right now about surveys.
All right, well, we could, if you want. Anybody have any objections?
I don't know, sounds good to me.
How much? 50,000?
It's a reasonable estimate.
So then we gotta figure out where. we want to put- So I just brought the revenue in for the fund balance. Where do we want to put that?
I go under professional services.
Visitor survey? Or is it visitor or citizen or what is it?
I would say both. I mean, I was thinking mainly about visitors, but also residents as usual. So just say visitor and resident sort of opinion survey. Yeah, that's pretty general.
Yeah.
Hopefully early in the year, we will decide more specifically what
Yeah.
the priority is.
Okay.
I think on a similar line, so you zeroed out this mobile visitation data.
Yeah.
it seemed like we were just getting started, like, I know Elaine had been collecting data. It seemed like it had a lot of potential. I never really saw any output from it. But, you know, that's not a huge amount of money, and it would be, I think we should at least try to, you know, see if we can gain valuable insights from that cell phone stuff before maybe the land, who knows, maybe in 2 years, new privacy controls will kill that sort of
Yeah.
data. You know, it sounds pretty questionable already. the way they go.
Well, and however, in having talked to a lot of different companies, a lot of different people who we're trying to use this type of space, like this placer vendor does seem like the only one that has managed to avoid some of the.
But do you think it would, you know, suppose you didn't have to cut things, you know, like. we
Oh, I
had a little bit
definitely
of
have
extra-
that.
So you think it's.
Because
worth it?
for me, I think the biggest value is that you can do like geofence information for like local events. So like we could do special event analysis for every single event that is like, you know, Oster or whatever, with the placer data and get an understanding of where are they staying in town, what's economic impact, those types of information, which in the special event ordinance, you know, an economic impact analysis is a part. We have no real way of figuring that out at the moment. You know, their typical use cases, like I own a mall and which stores are people going to, so that I can see who are my anchor tenants, who's the most valuable people in this mall, and how's my mall comparing to this other mall down the street or in the comparable neighborhood. So you could do that basically with like, okay, Jeep Safari, Osta, everybody who's in here from this time period, where do they go, where do they spend their money in town, where are they from?
Anyway, I think it's a relatively small amount of money, so I'd be
Yeah.
inclined to put that back in there. Add another
And that'd be 16,000.
16.
Let me go back.
But I maybe just want to, I'm not at the end of my list, so we could,
Yeah, let me check the worksheet on this then. And then, what was it called again?
Placer. .ai.
Dot.
yeah, I think the line item was called mobile visitation.
Yeah, that's maybe more general instead of a particular vendor.
How much was it?
They quoted the 16 grand.
Let's see if I go get the expense side. Where was it on the expense?
It's
side?
under data.
Can you make sure that that 16 got saved in the contribution from fund balance?
Good job.
I think the main, and then the main thing left is, I like the idea of all the billboards nearby being some kind of responsible recreation message, as opposed to what they might be if someone else are renting them. So having some money in the budget, if an additional billboard, especially within town, but even ones that are nearby, as we see on the way here. I actually think that's a pretty worthwhile sort of advertising. So I don't. It's like.
I mean, I would
15,000,
guess that the billboard that we have is the most expensive, the $12,000 billboard. And I bet that that's on the upper end of what's in town. I would guess the average is like $10,000 a year or something like that for leasing. So, that would be my guess of the cost that we have to pay attention.
How much then?
So 3 billboards would be
30 grand.
30 grand. In case we want
Yeah,
to
so you could do 10 times. 10 times.
just for acquiring new billboards, when their leases are up. I don't know how you figure out what the right time to do is.
Yeah, no, I think it's just that Robert has to pay attention. I say Robert.
Where were
That's
the other-
under paid media. Is there anything else on your list, Kevin? While we're over here? Because I have one thought I'd throw out there.
Yeah, no, that's everything.
I'm just gonna make this one additional billboards.
Okay, yeah, that works. And while we're in there, Kevin, do you have more?
I'm done.
I think it would be, if you open up that paid media worksheet one more time. I really tried to find some additional funding for that, like 50 grand for like this steady drip marketing. One of the second highest requests we got from the travel council board for the list of prioritized expenditures is consistent and strategic marketing. And one concern I have about how the budget is at the moment is that we don't have anything to really say, like, we have something in market year round, even if it's not a ton, because the fly market campaign ends in March. So what I would throw out there is possibility of contributing that 50,000 or more from the fund balance to be able to contribute, not like a big campaign, but basically be strategic amongst the markets that we're in, so that we have some kind of a general presence throughout next year, which I think for me puts me on a better position to have conversations with the travel council board about meeting their request that's in the list of expenditures when we have that meeting during this process later this year. Because right now, really the only paid marketing, media marketing, is the fly market campaign that ends in March of next year. So that would be my last recommendation.
So what's, you mentioned 50K and you also mentioned the steady drip. So you just want to increase that, or is it?
Well, it's
something
just zeroed out right now. So I had to zero it
I
out to
didn't-
make it balance.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, so whether, ideally it'd be more like 100, which wouldn't be like a massive campaign, but would allow us to have like a reasonable strategic marketing presence with the current campaign that I think really does a good job of starting to be the messaging we're trying to get to, without like neither doing nothing nor blowing it up too much. So I mean, if I had my way, I'd throw like 100,000 in there and pull that from the fund balance for next year. So I'll throw that out there and your thoughts on that.
So this is a kind of a non-specific item. It's just some
Yeah.
advertising somewhere
I would
in
basically
addition to
say,
the flying campaign.
what I would say is like our drive market campaign that we have going right now, which we're paying about a little more than 350 for October through the end of the year. It would be similar markets, less intense, and maybe more like a single channel for, spread throughout key parts of the year. We're not always on, maybe we're on during key booking windows or with strategic markets, but basically say, love, can you stretch 100 grand throughout the year within this drive market strategy? What would you do with that? Is how it goes. So it could be specific to say like drive market.
No, I wasn't suggesting it should be more specific. I was just trying to understand.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I would want to, I think we made great progress, adjusting our messaging to
Yeah.
our current situation, but I think before we start something new, I'd want to have additional conversations like that. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to just authorize, more of the same,
I think that's what it would be. So it would be,
especially things that are geared toward visitor behavior and things like
Yeah.
that. Imagine that would be a-
yeah. I mean, I'm saying this basically like campaign that we're having market right now, that people seem to feel really comfortable with what the messaging is in that, and just having that as a more strategic year-round budget outside of the fly market campaign that has a specific focus until March of next year.
But I guess, as I think our current campaign, we should, before putting, that I'd like to, see how we can make it even,
Oh, sure. Okay.
not just.
Yeah. So I think we could have like a year-end evaluation of how's that gone so far and how could we improve it.
Well, Yeah, I guess I was thinking before just spending additional money, we think about how the messaging could be tweaked. As opposed to just take messaging we're running right now, just.
Okay, can we do that and put money in here, or are you saying that we should put money in here? before
But
we-
no, I'm here, you mean that second line up there?
Yeah.
I just wanted the understanding that that second line is for some, it's the, version 2 of the stuff we're doing right now.
Yeah.
But we'll consider how the version 2 should be changed before.
Yeah, that works.
So what's the outcome then?
I think if we add a
Put a
100,000
one
from,
there and then
from
add
fund
52 to the
balance.
fund balance.
Okay,
So how much are we at? 100 or 50?
I'd put 100 if it was me.
Do I hear 80?
I would, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a little bit premature to decide how much we're gonna spend before we even know very specifically what the ads are gonna be saying, and what they're trying to accomplish. I think we do have the ability to do mid-year budget amendments. So I think we just have that as a placeholder.
Well, and it's hard, we don't have comparable years for the last like 3 years in this area, so we're not really sure what we should be spending in this.
Well, what we spent this year was we spent 200,000 on the visitor education campaign. And that was really the only paid media we did until we launched this fly market campaign, which was 400 this fall, and then the drive market campaign, which was 350 this fall. So that contribution this fall was significant compared to what we had paid in the past. And then, in years and years past, it's been more like billions of dollars in this kind of a line item. But to answer your question, what was budgeted in paid media was like $500,000 last year, basically.
Last year, meaning this year.
This year.
Sorry.
So are we going up or down from 2022's budget?
Well,
This would-
2022, we drew a huge amount of money out of fund balance, which is what we're talking about doing again right now.
So currently what's in here would be a lesser spend than what we're spending this year, including the fund balance.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm estimating we have about 500,000 that we can draw out, still have nothing but fund balance, cash flow.
Yeah, so to me, 100,000 additional here on top of the other, it's at 60 or 75 is like a.
But, the other thing, Kevin, is like, you don't have to spend the budget. If, the commission says we need to review everything before it goes out, then, that's how it will go.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I mean, I
my
think,
main concern is that, just we talk about what the goals
Mhm.
of it, before, jumping into it.
Totally.
But I do think these numbers, no one knows what the correct amount to spend is, and so that whatever number we put here will become the default.
I'm coming from the chamber, this is a hot topic, it's a big old button.
Yeah.
So also, what is the county's response gonna be to the businesses when they're asking what was spent on marketing from TRT funds?
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm coming from when I'm like, we need to have something in here that's additional to the fly market campaign. That's like, we're going to be in market year round. It's not going to be as much as maybe 2019. I don't think that's the expectation at this point. We have a lot of other messaging campaigns that we're doing with responsible recreation. I mean, there's a lot of money coming out of there, but that there's like intentionality and thought behind having some money in this year round marketing. And that's where I'm coming from.
So the advertising that exists, right, is this everything? I mean, there's all the in-town advertising that's being run through the recreation.
Is coming out of that budget piece. That's not coming from here.
Right.
So there is other
So
in-town
we've got
advertising.
billboards,
There's,
fly market campaign, plus the thing we're talking about right now, is that everything?
I mean, that's the main of the paid media. And yes. Yep. So I mean, it's small, but I think it's the message is right.
Why is
Looking
it
at-
so much smaller than 2019?
Well, the main part is that $1 million that used to be in this fund is in economic diversification. That's the main part. So what I'm trying to do is do more with less, and then make that money work hard in the other side of the fund. And that's basically it, because all of the other standard overhead costs fairly flat, like those things haven't changed that much.
Well, I'm not saying that you're wrong here. This is me just challenging the status quo, I guess, because it's gonna be asked.
Totally.
like,
It
what
what it
is- What is the response to businesses that are saying, we're not as busy? And that's because you're not marketing.
Right.
Why, like, what is our response gonna be when we're,
Well, not as busy as what,
that's what businesses are saying. I'm not saying they're right. I'm
as last
saying,
year, for sure.
no, as 2019 numbers is,
Oh, no,
is
that's
what,
bad.
right, but that's what they're saying. I'm not, I agree with the
Yeah,
numbers.
I think the response is we've got more visitors than we did in 2019.
We have almost
2019,
twice as much TRT coming
people were
in
complaining
now
about
as
too many
we did
visitors,
2019.
so I think until we drop way below 2019, there's not a sense of urgency.
Yeah, I mean, we're double-digit growth every year since, what did you say, calculated like 13.3% growth
Or
since 2019.
compared to, that was the revenue rather than visit. I think
Oh, yeah.
visitation, like highway one traffic is up a little bit from 2019. And then revenue was up way up, 45% higher over 3 years.
So, I mean, the reality is that, the budget for TRT has gone up 45% since 2019. So even with parting out some of that diversification money, it still leaves the total budget, near the same. But what's happening, and I'll just say is that you're putting a lot of money into planning, data stuff.
Yep, that's definitely changed. Yep, and owned
And we
media.
didn't used to do that. We didn't do any of that kind of stuff before.
Yeah, and so I guess what part of my conversation on that component of it, which probably it's like $250,000, I would say, is that we need to understand. I think answer these questions more effectively, like what was our
Right.
actual visitation? We don't
Well, that's
have-
the thing, like, I'm not saying logic doesn't win here, but also logic is losing in our business owners' minds. So like the numbers, what you guys are saying is all correct, like I'm on board with that. But like even just like 2 days ago, the board meeting, when we're talking about the reservation system, we're having pretty intense arguments over what it has done to visitation. And as far as the business owners are concerned, they're getting very angry, feeling like this isn't happening. I get that the numbers don't agree, but it's a filling thing, and so they're gonna challenge the county. And so that's my only thing, is just, can we be prepared?
Well, I think a big part of it too is that, the last few years, we've seen a huge number of hotel rooms.
For sure.
And so
Increase,
there's-
yeah, our beds
there's-
like doubled in
we're definitely
12 months.
Running into some market saturation issues too. So it's not just, about advertising, it's about really spreading out
Right.
the business, and I think that, we're going to see growth.
Just transparency, communication, I think is gonna be helpful to the business owners of them realizing like what we're spending, why we're spending it, where we're putting efforts. That would be my.
And that's what these meetings are all about. That's.
Nobody
there's
pays
no
attention to
stat-
these.
yeah.
I wish they did, but nobody pays attention to
I know, I mean,
these.
there's no statutory requirement that we have these meetings, and so these meetings are strictly about transparency.
Transparency.
So anyway, though, so I'm just trying to summarize all the ad spending currently in the budget. There's a flying campaign. There's a significant amount of billboards. There's the stuff that goes through the recreational, local advertising. And is that it? Other
Well, this
than-
side only has our match for the
Yeah. So there's
cooperative
another,
grant, so there's
that's
another
really good.
425,000 that we still haven't even got.
Right.
So,
So
if-
looking at raising this to 152.
What I would say, what I would like to see is if we can raise that drip marketing to 100, we have 450 going to the fly market campaign. We have 100 that's kind of divvied out throughout the year very strategically, but we're like, give us the strategic year-round kind of like, hey, let's try to, whatever the better strategy is. We're just staying in market around year-round. Because I think otherwise we're not.
Okay, so it's 100, sure.
Yeah, and I think it's just
Good number.
It seems like the co-op, those sorts of opportunities are fairly regular.
every year. So, I think that when it comes to strategy for co-op for next year, which basically, because the state's on fiscal, you apply in June and then they allocate in July when the budget happens. And so I think, we got almost the max for this year, and I think that's really important, given that we are more constrained budgetarily for our paid media. Something I would consider next year too is like applying for helping to develop the Keystone video, for example. Quite expensive.
But that's a big part of what we're gonna do with responsible rec too. So that is in the budget too, so.
Yeah.
That could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's really geared to like drive all that traffic down into your website,
Yeah.
and so that's, there's big plans for that.
I think also like long-term, what I see, my optimistic view is that through this planning process, we can have these conversations collectively, get the businesses in the same room as our policymakers and our community members and say like, okay, what are reasonable expectations? What are reasonable goals? And then how do we measure those goals objectively, and have someone kind of report to us and say, are we on goal or are we not on goal? And how do we adjust accordingly? Because we don't really have that in a way that everybody's. And then, I think that once we have this kind of like education platform built out, branding that feels that it's like, okay, everybody feels like they have a piece of that, then I feel like we would be in a position to drive more money towards that in a more focused manner, instead of having, like, this isn't in between. We wouldn't spend as much money on strategy at that point. We wouldn't spend as much money on consultants. It would just be like, okay, now we have our thing, we have our focus, we're gonna jam on that for a little bit.
Let's just cover this non-TRT department, so these are our grants, the other side of that, so we got another 425,000 in advertising here, no, this is the rural county grant, sorry.
Yep.
225,000 in advertising. And this other 200,000 is the rural county grant program that you guys all understand.
And what does that go for?
So we applied this year with a fairly similar application to how money was spent this year. So significant amount of that went to support workforce housing initiatives, childcare initiatives, as well as to help put on the business summit that we put on. So we're going to continue to basically fund those types of programs out of that funding source. And then of note, last year, I don't know, I was lost. The Part B, which is now called the Rural Communities Opportunity Grant, we got 300,000 to support the Skyline Arch apartment complex at Arroyo Crossing. We were ineligible to apply for that this year, so that's why it's zeroed out at the moment. But Ben's working with the city because they're eligible to apply this year to support another childcare facility.
Did you say parking complex?
Apartment.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I like to do. I just kick the hornet's nest on a daily basis.
All right, so
I hope you guys didn't, like, I'm not saying you're wrong or anything. All I was saying was like, this is what's gonna be asked, so let's be ready to answer the questions.
yeah, and we appreciate it, yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Jamie.
You're correct. That's what's going
Oh, I'm trying to communicate from both heads.
So this is the end then of this new fund. Is there anything else we want to cover before we move on?
No, I think that's like, I was looking at that 2026 year. Bang the drum fairly consistently. That's what we need to be focusing on.
I did something wrong.
Deleted this whole.
I think I forgot to put some negative numbers. Revenue has to be.
No, just that I think that last year has been trying not to drown, I would say, and that now I have a better vision of like what the ship I'm on is and what direction we're heading. So with planning next year with the new look, I'm hopeful that after that we'll be able to kind of hit the ground running with new programs that we feel good about, and that we're chasing money to really make some changes happen. Yeah, that's it. Get the money again in 2026.
Anybody have anything else for August?
That's you.
All right, yeah, thanks, yeah, it's kind of a big job to come up with a whole new chart of counts.
Yeah.
Sorry for that.
But I think it'll make it much easier for us on TRT.
Glad we broke it out like this. I think it'll make a huge difference.
It's easier for me to manage too.
Okay, so next up, Renee,
Yay.
are you in? You want to share your
I
screen?
am.
So next up, we've got all the new position requests, reclassified position requests.
Also, bless you. These jobs are very hard.
Okay. I had some columns here that are just insurance and
You might need to, like,
calculations.
zoom in.
Yeah, I will.
Nobody can see that.
It's a big one. But we'll start with proposed positions. So these are all new. No person is currently in the role. No one's doing this job. Tyson's is a little bit of an exception, but let me zoom in. So in the general fund, we have the jail, the Spillman analyst / evidence tech. This position is kind of being done by the deputies themselves. The evidence tech duties are held kind of in the sheriff's office by their admin assistant. So this would be one person doing these two duties. To handle their Spillman's system, which is like the jail management, case management.
So Spillman's the name of the software.
It
package
is.
that they use.
Yep. And then the evidence side of it is just tracking evidence, making sure it's in the right spot.
And why is the jail tracking evidence rather than the?
Because there's no one else to do it.
There is no one else to do it, but the jail and the sheriff's office work pretty closely together. Shan does have a written draft job description for this one. I sure can. Yeah, pull out of here. This position will also do the hardware and the software side of the Spillman administration, and also serve as this main point of contact when they have to contact Spillman. So that's a lot of time on the phone for one deputy, and then be able to provide any trainings to the deputies that are using it. So
Before we go further, are we just gonna pass this on to the commission to decide, or are we supposed to make a recommendation about which of these?
Yeah, I mean, what's gonna happen is at the end, I'm gonna say, this is how much we're over budget. And I think that our recommendation is to adopt a tentative budget with instructions to balance the budget, essentially. And maybe we wanna go into more detail than that and specify, like, generally in the general fund, we underspend our budget usually by about $600,000 to $800,000 a year across all departments. And that's mostly because we're not fully staffed, even though we budget to be fully staffed. So if we budget to draw $800,000 out of the fund balance, we probably will end up being zeroed out at the end of the year. So if we go over that, I say we're not balanced. But there's a variety of options. We'll get into the cost of living adjustment that could be decreased. A lot of that overage is from capital requests. A lot of it's from these position requests, which are currently plugged in. So there's a lot of options for bringing everything back down.
Okay, so
But
previously
anyway,
when we were looking at.
these are,
budgets,
the total amount in here is plugged into the budget right now. It's not plugged into the salary and benefits line items, but just the estimated amount by fund. I plugged into a expense line item, just as a placeholder. So the commission in the past has always been the one that approves new position requests and reclassifications. And so I think, for us, our main decision is going to be like, how do we want to, if we, we want to propose a balanced budget, which is going to require more workshops in November. If we could get into more specificity about that. If we want, or we could just say, get it down to this number. However,
So
we'll get, when we get to that point,
when I've been hiring in new positions, like usually we are coming to the table with like the fiscal benefit of these things. Like, is that part of new positions?
some of them is, there are a few positions that are offset by other funding. I think maybe the only one is in GCAT, where there's a proposed
Grant.
cost share with the health department for a poop ambassador.
Like, for this one specifically, I'm thinking,
Right.
okay, but I might have watched too many TV shows, so like,
So-
if there's correct evidence, then maybe we close on more
Sure.
Yeah,
And
it's
like,
a public
case
service.
issues.
yeah,
Right.
or like how much
Like
of our deputies' time is being taken up by this Spillman issue? Is it true that this will really offset?
Right, those are, I guess my questions was
Okay.
like, great, that's awesome, that it's a good position, it sounds awesome, but what's the actual benefit to the county?
My recommendation is actually be to cut the sheriff's position. It's not 10. There's 2 positions I think we can cut, and I don't think we should add it.
Well, are there 2 to cut and we should add this one? This sounds like an important one. What are you
Yeah,
recommending?
I
we
mean,
get?
we'll have to negotiate with the sheriff. I mean, when we get to the point where we talk about this in a workshop, we'll have to invite everybody in that,
Should we negotiate with current sheriff or new sheriff?
well, the current one.
Okay,
So should
Which
we
might be
just-
the current.
yeah,
sheriff.
then let me, I'll just go through them and
Sorry, I've never done the county like,
you're fine.
budget
It's a good
on this level.
It's a great question.
Also, in the general fund, I'm proposing an personal services assistant director.
That's your assistant.
That would be my assistant. I'm willing to negotiate on this one, but I do think it's time that we bring another person into the office as we keep adding positions everywhere else.
Now, you've been budgeted for this, so like the biggest issue has been finding someone to hire.
No, so we've never been budgeted for an assistant director. We had a specialist budgeted a while ago, 2 years ago, right before COVID hit, and then COVID hits, we reallocated some of the funding to make the IT position a full-time position.
But we don't have the space for it either.
We also don't have the space.
So to do that, we'd also have to approve capital improvement or like a. capital
Yeah, and we
improvement.
can get
Figure out
that
the
too.
space.
The Four Corners, the Interact Club Pass is actually on our property. They vacated and went to their new building, and so
So there's
we're
space now.
gonna purchase that building from them. We already own the land, but we'll purchase the building and renovate it, so we will have space next year, and there is a budget for that that will carry over into next year. But anyway, proceed.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. The John Cortez in the recorder's office has proposed an additional deputy recorder. So he has currently 1 deputy recorder, 1 chief deputy. So this would be 2 deputy recorders at the same grade.
I don't think he, at the reporter's presentation, I don't remember that being mentioned at all.
And he didn't. He brought it to me after that presentation. He was one of the first ones, correct?
Yeah, he's kind of had this. That's
Yeah.
one of the, when we did our staffing analysis last time, it said that he needed 1, but there's plenty of others also.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's in a staffing analysis that he needs.
We had this discussion of adding a county engineer. I pulled some comps, so that's where the grade 20 came from. I don't know if we want to consider that moving forward, but also it would be a space consideration and kind of what department to put this person under. We want to create its own department.
Well, ultimately, like my big picture goal is to get a community development department together that's planning, zoning, engineering, and building inspection, floodplain administration, have all under one umbrella. So the engineer would be a component of that department. So the issue with the engineer really is that our level of service, because of contract engineer or somebody out of Provo, Salt Lake, for most of our inspections, it only comes down once every 2 weeks. And if there are problems, then it's a long time to wait. If you have to wait 2 weeks, if they're in, Kevin and others have been privy to some real catastrophic outcomes from not having an in-house engineer. So the level of service to the community in terms of engineering for planning and zoning approval is very low right now. We're contracting and we can't even, even if I budgeted more money to have them come more, they just can't. And we don't have a lot of options that way. So this
Do we
would,
anticipate that the contracting costs will go down if we hire an engineer?
oh, no. So that's the issue. I mean, we probably spend about 40,000 a year on our engineer for the purposes of subdivision review and all this kind of stuff, which would be the main job of this person. What's the total on your estimate, Renee? It's going to be like 3 times that at least.
Yeah, engineers aren't, I don't know any, I was looking at that number, I was like, I don't know an engineer that works for that.
Salaries are 96, a total employee cost would be 145.
So yeah,
Most
But I'm
engineers
just
are
wondering, is that
180.
185 going to be offset at all by this engineer doing something that we're currently contracting for?
I mean, there might be some possibility, but engineers are very specialized. And
So they would be doing.
this
work
would
that's
be
not
an
getting done now at
engineer
all.
that would specialize in subdivision review.
In theory, it'd be awesome to have one. But like,
So, yeah, I mean.
But I
it's
guess I'm
expensive.
still puzzled. I mean, person's going to be doing work that's not being, I'm assuming they're doing work that is getting done, maybe not as well. But are you saying in addition, we're still going to be paying the same amount to engineering consultants?
Oh, no, we would drop that.
That was my question.
So,
someone
I mean,
looking
it
at
would
that-
be,
that should be
about
145
40,000
minus
less than
40.
145,000.
when you have an engineer helping plan a community that they are a part of, that's kind of a whole different ballgame than when you're contracting out to someone that really doesn't have anything in the game. There's no skin in the game. They're just,
I understand that. I guess I'm just trying to help you make the case for the engineer, which is, we look at this number, how much it's going to cost.
Yeah. the
right,
net-
we're
we should
losing a
actually
big
set-
old chunk of money
the
that we're
net
spending
in-
already.
Yeah, the net increase would be about 105,000, I'd say. And maybe better than that. I mean, we do have other engineers, depends on who we hire, what they're.
Well, to get an
what
engineer that's
their
willing to
abilities are.
wear multiple hats and.
But it's really, a matter of dramatically, being able to dramatically increase the level of service that we provide to people who are applying for land use permits and whatnot. So it's pretty high priority, I think, personally. But there is a cost associated with it, an increased cost for sure. So you have to, the question we'll have to ask ourselves is that $105,000 worth the increased level of service for the community?
I think it is. I just don't know that it needs to necessarily be a 2023 project with all of your current hiring needs.
One other small note, just for everyone, when we have a vacant position or proposed position, we generally just budget at a step 3. The grade is set with the position. The steps are set with somebody's experience. So somebody coming in with 20 years of engineering experience would be higher than a step 3 and higher than this annual rate.
So yeah, that's a cheap thing.
That's a cheap engineer. It's a baby engineer. And then we generally do like a 2-party insurance budget on there. So it could be slightly higher if they have a family on it as well. The airport has proposed somewhat of a restructure. I can pull that up in a little bit when we get down into some of the reclassifications. But it would be adding an operations tech. They currently have one person who's an operations tech. And the odd number of people and their 24-hour coverage schedule is kind of leaning a little bit odd. So I'll get to that in a minute. Active trails or active transportation and trails has the nice term for it, healthy trails coordinator or PUBASsador, what Maddie keeps calling it. I just can't bring myself to put that on any of my
I think that's fair enough.
official documents.
What are they calling it?
Ambassadors.
But this person, so the health department has a grant that they have for 2023, but also for 2024, and then some optimism that grant funding will continue. But this person would handle the programming around the leg bags and getting that kind of messaging about trail hygiene out there.
So that figure of 77, that's,
That's the total cost.
okay, so
Um,
the
Half of
cost
that would
to
be-
us would be half of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the net would be half of that.
So. And then another proposed change in GCAT is Tyson's role is currently operations manager, that he handles oversight of the trails techs. And Anna is the responsible recreation coordinator. She handles oversight of the trail ambassadors. Tyson would like to go part-time. So we want to leave the full-time role there. This part-time operations tech would just open up Tyson to kind of apprentice whoever gets in the manager role and allow him to move away from full-time employment.
I didn't quite follow that. So I think this is a new part-time
new
position.
part-time.
So it's a new part-time, it's adding a new part-time position,
Okay, which Tyson would take and then.
which Tyson would take, and it would open up his operations manager position right now.
Okay.
So that's all of the new proposed positions. It's moved and reclassified. So as part of the airport's kind of reclassification, organization charts for them. Size here. Vision costs. So the current structure at the airport is the airport director, then this operations manager, and then this kind of odd number of people. So the two operations specialists who are grade 9s, and then operations tech, and then the two that handle the land side, which is they usually clean like the terminal and kind of handle the terminal side of things. In the proposed structure, it would be eliminating this operations manager position, splitting the duties out into these two operations specialists, calling them lead operations specialists. And then it would kind of even up, adding in that operations tech. So even up the shifts there. So one operations specialist, one operations tech, and then the landside tech on each kind of shift. Just kind of giving them better coverage.
So am I reading that correctly? It's the same total number of employees?
It is the same total number of employees.
And what's the net cost difference?
So with the adding the operations tech, upping the two specialists to lead specialists, and removing the operations manager, the net is about 1896.
Approximately.
Yeah. Mallory's office, the commission administrator, has proposed kind of an increase in Alicia's role for this community communications and outreach. So that's a 1 grade increase. I might have something goofy on my number there. No, I think we're good. A 1 grade increase on that one. That would be with some increased duties as far as communication, social media, and community outreach.
I think mostly she's already been dealing with this not in her job role currently.
Yeah, I pulled up the job description. There's a small part in there, but this would be kind of more focused on getting that social media and the community to kind of engage with our website and all the changes we're making as a county.
But is it like a higher level of skill set? Why did they grade increase?
Yeah, I pulled some comps on kind of the communications, people who are doing communications. So yes, it would be, I would say, a higher skill set, but maybe more of a time commitment on actual communication and pulling in kind of that outreach and communication. side of
Well,
it.
she's still targeting to work 40 hours a week, right?
More of a focus
I
on
mean,
the,
I guess I would say, not that I wouldn't necessarily jump a, do a grade increase. Unless it, required a more advanced level of skill than what the current job is.
Well, and before she was in this role, I do feel like this had little tiny touches, and she's taken the initiative to make it bigger than the role actually required. So this almost seems like an, hey, you proved that you could do it, so now we're giving it to you, is what my opinion has been of that. Rather than them saying, we want this already in your role, like she took it upon herself and had the initiative to do it. I've actually seen it within the communications, especially on social media of the county. I feel like it's warranted, but either way.
Yeah, I guess I thought we just already wrote it in the job description. I helped write that job description.
Yeah.
I put it in there.
I got a draft on that one. So this section in the red is kind of what was proposed to be added to the job description.
And where was the part that already was similar to that?
We had the social media in here. Sorry, let me zoom in on this. Provides communication support, website design and maintenance, social media newsletters, etc. This one, the addition would be oversees the public relations on behalf of the commission.
So
commission
this is
admin
gonna be
office.
like adding basically a PIO.
Like a P, yeah.
So that is pretty big.
Well,
I mean. Yeah, I know, but is the, yeah. PIOs.
I pulled here.
Her current role is called the commission coordinator, right?
It is.
Commission office coordinator.
Okay, well, I mean, it's gonna be the commission that decides these, so, but it's useful to have these discussions anyway for the public.
Yeah, absolutely. The jail added this year in 2022, the 24/7 drug program. And currently this is like putting the ankle monitors and kind of facilitating, taking in cash from people with drug-related charges to participate in this 24/7 program. So adding a 2-grade increase to their existing jail admin to be the program manager for this. So it would take away any time that any deputies handling it and put it all on one person to handle the program around this 24/7 programming. Justice Court is in the general fund. This request is to match it to the closest competitor, which is District Court. District Court is a state entity, so they run off of a fiscal year. So when we did the salary survey last year, we didn't have the numbers for what District Court would be changing to. So it's a one grade increase to match that kind of closest competitor on the deputy 1 and the deputy 2. The chief deputy range is what we set it at, is kind of matching what their chief of or clerk of courts is already at. Economic development 116. Just some changes the admin assistant had in its special events. We need to kind of pull that out, but increasing kind of the economic development programming.
I can speak to that.
Yeah, if you want to take it away.
So we've had this admin assistant role in our office for a long time. It's basically become the de facto special event coordinator. And the special event coordinator piece of the job description is going away as there's a new position that's taking that on. And so what I'm proposing is basically for that percentage of the job, which is right now like 70% or so of the job description, basically reclassing that job and adding new job descriptions that are focused on building out like the workforce development programming that we have in our budget, as well as kind of assisting with this coordinating with this strategic planning and kind of community outreach. So basically making that a bigger job than it is right now from a program perspective for our office, as well as the second position here is reclassing Ben's economic development specialist position to kind of this economic diversification development manager or assistant economic development diversification director, which basically just brings him up to what he's been doing. He's done above and beyond his job description. And he does practically manage wholesale a whole lot of programs that we've created and will continue to manage. And so wanting to, and he'll be managing Vista next year. So wanting to make that, both of those things kind of sussed out here.
And if the program manager were to go through, Ben would also be managing that person in some capacity.
In some capacity, yeah.
What's his current role called?
Economic development specialist.
So those two in economic development are proposed at a 2-grade increase. Maddie and I didn't get a chance to connect on this, and I don't know if it's still a request. We chatted about it a while ago, and then I tried to call her today, but just equalizing the responsible recreation coordinator position with the operations manager role would be a 1-grade increase, as they're both managing people under them. So like I said, the operations manager is now managing the trail techs. Anna's role, the responsible rec coordinator, is managing the trail investors. Thank you. Last year was the first year we had this responsible recreation, or 2022 was the first year we had a responsible recreation coordinator. So we had it at a grade 9, so proposed for 1-grade increase there. And then other edits and costs. Chris, I think these are the 2 patrol deputies that you're kind of referring to, or positions in the sheriff's office, but we.
So, I mean, those are kind of predicated on a requirement that's not in place yet. And so I think when we move to the next phase of the airport expansion and they start bringing the, the emplacement, when the emplacements get up to a certain threshold, I can't remember what it is, then there's a requirement to have law enforcement at the airport or within 15-minute response of the airport at all times. So this is, originally what they said it would take to do that, to cover 24-hour 15-minute response.
I thought it was just when TSA is present.
I can't remember. I mean, we have to maybe ask Daryl or Steve. But, they froze those positions. They're still actually in the budget right now. They just froze the hiring of them. But they're not technically required yet. And, that's probably $300,000 right there.
Sure. That being said, we have right now with these 2 positions and the other vacancies in the sheriff's office, there's 5 patrol vacancies. So getting these filled might not be even a thing in 2020.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying, when we get to the end, here, you'll see that we have to cut a lot of money out of the budget somehow, or reduce the COLA or something, some combination of things.
Sure. And then my other 2 on this list are just for a reminder for myself. We just have some job description updates, no grade changes or anything proposed there. It's not special, that stuff out. So
Okay.
that's it for positions.
Thanks, Renee. Let's see. Anybody have any other discussion on the positions before we move on? All right, let's see. Let's bring up.
Sorry, Chris, I did have a question.
Go ahead.
Renee, I was just wondering, in preparation for, talking with the commission, and if they are trying to have to cut stuff, did you have a discussion with any of the folks who are proposing new positions as to whether part-time could work for them or be an improvement or be a possibility if they can't get a full-time if we don't have the money for it?
Chris, that's a great question. I think when these positions go in front of the commission, it would be best to have the people proposing the positions there to kind of be the ones doing that negotiating, and deciding if part-time is something they would be willing to do or start with at least. Some of the
Sounds
times-
good. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Some of the times we start with a part-time position and then we get in a year and we're like, oh, we have enough work for this person to do a full year, so.
Sorry, my bad.
Really get.
Okay. We get on the positions?
Yeah,
Ready to move
I
on?
think so.
So here's the capital project request that I've got so far. This may need to be refined in November. I need to check back in with everybody to make sure that this list is complete, but let's go through it real quick. We've got the airport needs some improved drainage around their ARP building. Looking to, that's 10,000. For an awning for the terminal, 40,000. They need a new backup generator, 30,000. We want to get a electrical hookup for a food truck, which is 7,500. 1,000 in billboard maintenance, possibly wanting to do some design work on a solar farm out there for 20,000. Storage container for 8,000. And then let's see. I asked the attorney's office if they already have this software integration in their budget already. I'm not sure if they do or not. I don't think this would be capital anyway. It should be in just since it's just software. I don't know. We can consider that capital. But anyway, they're looking for $10,000 for software integration with Carpal. Not sure what that is. At the Grand Center, they need an evaporative cooler for $8,185. A small AC unit for $3,400. Another AC unit for the office for $4,200. And then the courthouse, phase 1 of HVAC upgrades at $104,254. Phase 2 at $115,000. I think one of these, does this include, Renee, the stuff that didn't get done this year?
Mhm.
Okay,
So like that.
phase 1 was budgeted this year, but it's not going to happen. So that's a carryover from this year.
Same with the generator.
And our generator, yeah, that one, our generator is crapped out. And then there's the install, 42,000 for the generator. Oh, HVAC phase 2. Let me backtrack. 115,000 on that. Courthouse replacement generator is about 42,000. The install on it's about 20,000. The boiler room, which is kind of where Matt is, there's all kinds of problems with the valves. This is causing the jail showers to be lukewarm at best. All the mixing valves need to be replaced or fixed. And so that's sort of an estimate on fixing all the plumbing down there. The emergency operations, so that's 200,000 there. The emergency operations center is roof repair to estimate 50,000, and then some gutter work because there's everything drains on the front of the building, which faces northeast and freezes on the ground. So 15,000 to fix the drainage off the roof. Weed department needs some HVAC upgrades at 10,000. Old Spanish Trail Arena, $15,000 panel order. Old Spanish Trail Arena, $50,000 sound system. The sheriff is requesting 2 speed trailers at about 12,000 each. And then piece of equipment, a shield for patrol. I guess that's like a bullet shield. And then new body cameras for a total of 36,790. The airport wants a couple of vending machines at 6,000 each. Search and rescue is going to purchase a Polaris Ranger Wasn't there a grant associated with that?
Yeah, it was in
So
the
the-
match grant, 20,000 on each.
Yeah, so maybe we're only be paying half of that. And then the sheriff requested IT tech system for 7,750. Total 899,042.
So these are all things that have already appeared in the budgets that we've looked at, right?
Yeah, I think so, for the most part.
So we're looking at them separately here, just because they're candidates for cutting. If we
They all have to go, I have to take them out of the general fund budget, or to the general fund capital budget, because the auditors don't allow us to spend
cut.
capital out of those budgets. And so this is basically a transfer from the general fund to capital projects fund. So right now I've got a transfer, coming from there for this amount of money, 899,000. And then it's revenue onto the capital projects fund. And so while I'm at it, I just wanted to bring up that capital projects fund. And show you the rest of it. So this is showing a couple things. So here, this 899,042 is the revenue from that transfer for all those things. We deposited last year in 2021, we put 3.5 million into capital projects, and that was for office space needs. So this would be what we would use to purchase the Interact Clubhouse, renovate it, and then any other, and begin savings on the bigger picture of office space needs, which goes well beyond that. So that's a $3,500 or $3,500,000 set aside, for office space. It could be repurposed though. So, one of the options is say, we're not going to need all that money for the Interact Clubhouse. Let's use it to pay for this 899,000. And then that takes 899,000 out of the expense side of the general fund. But the downside of that is that you're cutting into my office space savings. And, so, we're like, pretty desperate. But I mean, the Interact Clubhouse would keep us going for a while. Probably another 5 or 6 years, I'll bet. But we are in need of, another long-range 20, 30-year horizon plan for office space. The last big courthouse remodel is 30-year anniversary this year. Sell fixed assets, this is, for selling property. It's just a big number that's kind of arbitrary, but if we sell all the property in San Juan County, this is where I received it in. And then again, I think when you sell property, it has to go to capital projects. You can't use it for maintenance and operations by statute. And so it would be able to be used for any capital needs if we sold that property in San Juan County. And that's just a budget for that, if it happens, may or may not. So that's the capital projects budget. This third $3,500,000 is coming out of the fund balance for 2021. 12 million is hypothetical upon selling the property. And at this point, that 899,000 is a transfer from the general fund. So makes sense. But some of the possibilities too is to for cutting is like I say, repurposing some of this 3.5 million to cover those expenses or part of them, or cutting some of the capital projects out, prioritizing those capital projects and weeding some of them out that aren't essential.
Central one feels tiny.
I mean, that's it for capital projects right now. And I still have to touch base and double check everybody's capital projects needs as we roll into our November workshops. So it's possible this number could grow a little bit if I miss some. Yeah, that's where we're at right now. Anybody have any questions on capital project? Okay. Next up on the agenda is cost of living adjustment. So I'm gonna cover our fund balances here too before we close out, because that's kind of important to understand. So these are my estimates. So basically plugged in a 8.5% COLA, which is the same as the Social Security Administration's adjustment to benefits. And pretty much the same as the average inflation rate, which is very, very high. And so the costs associated with COLA like this, for the general fund, it'd be 940,884. For economic development, it'd be 58,526. For Fund 17, which pays for part of our emergency manager, 4,131. Roads Department, 136,927. The miscellaneous grants is where some of the weed department employees are, 5,922. Dallas Tailings Fund is our intra liaison at 2,773, and that's assuming that that would be all grant covered, so it wouldn't really affect anything else. Children's Justice Center would be 7,281. Family Support Center would be 21,668. GCAT and Child Ambassadors would be 35,568. Sam Flats Recreation, 40,263. And the library, 79,377. And that's a total of $1,333,320 for 8.7% COLA. So yeah, we've never done a COLA that big. So one of the options also for dialing, getting the budget in balance is reducing the COLA. I mean, one thing that happens though is we periodically do salary adjustments, based on market comparables. And what happens is you don't do the same COLA as everybody else is doing, and you end up, it just gets you down the road. It always catches up to you.
It's a hard one. I guess a financial advisor, most of the time you just see pretty average COLA adjustments with most corporate entities where it's between 3% and 4%, and then it tends to average out. It's the highest inflation rate that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I mean,
So
we've
it's-
matched the inflation rate, so we've had COLAs as low as like 1.6, 1.2.
But I also think that we have to consider that we don't necessarily fit in line with the rest of the country, that our cost of living is not going to go down when we've had the recession we've had. Our housing market doesn't drop. We stabilize, we don't drop.
Yeah, I mean, our inflation locally is probably much higher than that.
Yeah.
So,
So I have a hard time voting anything other than saying, yes, we need to do this. Because it's too hard to find good employees.
Yeah.
And while we have them, we need to help them be able to survive.
and I mean, you probably remember as we were going along and people were proposing increases to their 2023 budget versus 2022. And I said, hey, I'm trying to save room for a COLA. Would you rather have a COLA or would you rather have these other
I
things?
just think people don't think about it.
So, but now it's time to think about it.
Yeah.
So, reducing the COLA would probably be the last thing I would do. But it's still on the table, I think. And the first thing I would do is go back to the departments who have significantly increased their budget relative to 2022. And say, what can you cut back? Because obviously a lot of it's new stuff. And then some of these unused positions, for instance, in the sheriff's department, we could probably, stay frozen, the airport position specifically. So some departments, they're already under bare bones. You can't ask them to cut their budgets. They've got nothing to cut. And they are the ones that the only real increase relative to 2022 is going to be related to the merit system for career, for step increases and the COLA. So they don't have anything to cut, but there's some departments that did increase their budgets relative to 2022. And it would be those that I would go back to and say, what can you do to cut this back down so that we can get a COLA?
And do we take into account like the net numbers? So the department may be increasing their budget, but their revenue covers it. So it's like net wise.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are, it's really the general fund I'm mostly worried about. We balanced already the economic development department with the COLA, but obviously, you could say that if they didn't do the COLA, they put that money into advertising. The roads department's fine. They've got the money to cover their own COLA. It's not gonna come from the general fund. But Children's Justice Center and Family Support Center are basically propped up by the general fund right now, so that's basically gonna have to come from the general fund. Parks, Trails, and Rec, I think, you know, we can cover that with the optional transportation tax. Sand Flats is self-funded, so they're no problem. The library, you know, is possibly getting into territory where they're, you know, start degrading their fund balance, and a COLA would, you know, speed up the need to do a property tax increase for them down the line somewhere. I mean, it'd probably be 5 years from now, but. So it's mostly the general fund I'm worried about. And that's the fund that kind of oftentimes runs the meanest. So anyway, that's the COLA right now. You know, when I present to the commission, I'll probably come up with, you know, a tier of different percentages and their costs. But this is just using the COLA strategy that we always use, which is to match the average inflation rate and Social Security adjustments.
I pulled the Utah counties, so out of 29, I got an answer back from 12. Out of those 12, 5 of them are doing a COLA at 8% or higher. Another person in our group pulled the ones that go off of the fiscal year, so mostly cities, in September, and that one averaged about 6.5%. Those who are June to July.
And they would have already done theirs.
They would have done theirs in June.
Could you send out just what the goals have been in past years?
Yeah.
Or maybe.
Do you have that, Renee?
Yeah, okay.
I know we have a big spreadsheet tracking it. We had to do some, yeah, we ended up having to do some adjustments. Like 2018, 2019.
And then I guess another comment about the COLA, we did just do a bunch of, you know, across the board salary increases. And when we were doing that, I think, you know, we were running budget surpluses, and I don't think anyone tried to, you know, push that down. You know, there wasn't a lot of pushback or belt tightening when making that decision. If we're, you know, you haven't shown us the bottom line of it yet, but if we are in financial trouble, we wish we could go back in time, made all those salary increases maybe 10% smaller than they were. A way to achieve the same effect is just make the COLA, you know, less than 8.7.
Well, I mean, there's only a handful of positions that I feel were out of line. I'm not gonna go into that right now.
I was gonna make that suggestion that the salary survey I think it did adjust a lot of, especially across the higher end across the county, but I think in many cases, the rank and file county staff.
That's absolutely not true.
Okay.
No, because I intentionally, remember Renee, I intentionally inflated the bottom end of that
Yeah.
salary adjustment, and the people on the bottom got a much greater increase than that.
Percentage.
Okay.
Percentage wise.
Yeah, so I mean, and it was, you know, it took a lot of math to do it, and I figured it out how to do it, but we.
Maybe another way of making my point though is that, you know, when we decide what the correct salary is, you know, we're looking at a bunch of other counties and cities, none of which are exactly the same as us, and they're all moving targets.
Sure.
And you know, it's not like it was some precise figure that was clearly the right answer. There was a pretty wide range that we could have justified.
But I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of that data was already 2 years old, maybe 3 years in a lot of cases.
There are
And so the issue
salaries
is, and I've already been through this, like in 2018, it was a nightmare trying to get our salaries caught up. And all I can say is if you don't do the COLA, that's competitive with all the others that are, you know, doing it, you end up paying for it eventually. Because when you get to that point, when you do your next salary adjustment, say, oh, we're way under everybody else.
Especially
Why
in
is
a county
that?
that our inflation, our deflation never matches the rest of them. Our inflation will be equivalent, but our deflation won't. Like, we will not go back down like the rest of them. In 2007, the housing market, the cost of living did not go back down like the rest of the state.
CPA it's mostly non-housing things.
I agree, but I'm also saying like the deflation doesn't occur all across the board. Our city market's always gonna be more expensive than if you go to a Smith's in Salt Lake. Our gas is almost $1 more right now than price. Like we do not deflate like the rest of the state does.
Yeah, the worst, the worst times I've ever seen Grant County go through is when our salaries start to become, people start trying to shift, everybody starts having to work.
So your feeling is the large majority of our salaries are probably on the low side of the range that they should be in.
They're average, so we took the average, like the dead average for most of them. Some of them we didn't.
Okay, but that's influenced by the things you chose to average. I just,
Well, some of them have great big data sets, like 50, 60 positions. We pull, I mean, TechNet has a lot of data. We had thousands and thousands and thousands of data points. It's a big project.
I
So
think this would be a terrible place for us to pull money from.
Well, like I said, I mean, I think that it might have to happen, but to me, it would be like the last thing that I would do. Just because, the ramifications of getting behind in this economy and not becoming competitive, like you really get bit in the butt fast. And it happened so fast in 2018 when we weren't out tanked. Surprising. I thought we were doing really well. The whole county crashed.
Going into the 19 budget, we didn't approve the COLA. Then you came in 19 in June-ish and we retroactively approved the COLA. So
Yeah, and the salary adjustments were held up too. I mean, it was just, anyway, but I mean, it's an option. Yeah, it's definitely an option. So let's bounce back to look at, some of the, so the amount of money that I have to draw from the fund balance is basically the bottom line. So this is how much, this $2,025,000 is how much we're in red.
we can't see your screen.
Oh, sorry. I always forget the first comment, it's just the fund. So there, $2,025,683 is what we'd have to pull out of the fund balance to zero out the budget. Like I said, we can get away with budgeting and take 800,000 out and then end up being pretty much zeroed out at the end of the year.
We're about 1.2 million, really. 1.2.
So like I said, I mean, there's options of
That's the general.
going back to some of these budgets where we've seen big increases relative to 2022 and say, what can you cut that's new? That's probably one of the first things that I would do is go back to the departments that have presented fairly large budget increases. and
So
say,
you
what-
showed it on a previous slide, but how much is in the general fund?
Oh, yeah, let me go back, because that's important to inform this conversation too, because we're doing very well financially in terms of cash.
And is it getting close to the statutory limit of how much we can have?
In the general fund, but we can always transfer it over to capital projects.
Okay, so you think we just shouldn't worry
What
about
are the
that?
statutes for like what we can keep in the general fund and what we have to keep in the general fund? Is there a surplus amount that we're required to keep?
No, but there's a max, and so it's like 65% of the annual general fund revenue can be held in reserve. And then in capital projects, you can have as much in capital projects as you need for your projects. So, probably a new office building, if we were to knock down a village house and build a new office building there, you're probably looking like 8 to 12 million.
So we do currently have a surplus though in the
Yeah,
general fund?
so we're pretty close to the max that we can have. Let me find that.
I'm sorry to ask this question. Why wouldn't we want to use the surplus? Is there,
Because it's, well, we have $80 million worth of stormwater infrastructure needs that are outstanding. We've got about an $8 to $12 million office space needs that are outstanding.
is there a plan in place for like 80 million? That's crazy big. So like, do we have like a 10-year plan? to do
Well,
this
we
I think it's
out?
a good question. Like how much we should use.
Right, like I'm trying to figure out like.
We have a priority list, yeah, and so we try to leverage the money, and so we're not just paying it out.
But do
right?
we
So
have
first-
like, this account is like set aside for stormwater and we're putting money in it every year?
Yes.
I mean,
So I'll cover that real quick too. Let me just pull this up so that
And you're saying we try to wait for a funding opportunity so that we're not just paying 100% out of our pockets. So part of that dictates how much we spend in a given year.
For sure, makes
Yeah,
sense.
but also, I think part of the point of a fund balance is to sort of smooth out some of our, revenue
Yeah, 'cause we
fluctuations.
basically have like 3 million between capital improvements and,
It could, yeah, so right at the beginning of this year, general fund had 8,793,000. Which is probably like right up against the maximum amount we can have. When I first got on the council, in 2009, we had about 1 million. So we're doing much better, but.
do we have, what are we saving for like the stormwater? That's a big expenditure, 80 million.
Yeah, so stormwater is a big issue and, we keep rolling across, we get CIP grants for it and that kind of thing.
What does that mean? It's like building retention ponds and stuff like that, that like Bill Jackson's responsible for, or Bill Holmes, or?
Yes.
And are we
But
like
some of them are, like,
chipping
really
away
big.
at that?
The big expense coming up is
So
a
do we
gigantic.
still
pipeline
owe 80 million?
near Jackson Street.
Is that still
Well, I
an
mean,
$80
it's just
million project?
when we passed that plan in 2012, 2013, it was about 40 million. So estimates of, at least double. So we don't really know what it's going to cost at this point. It's been spent so long since we did the study. But for instance, the last project that I just got approval for, I got like I think $900-something thousand grant, and then I'll look it up. I'll show you in our stormwater fund here in a minute. But I got a big grant and a big 1% non-interest loan, and then use the money that we saved up for stormwater to match that and get that money, which is our strategy.
But I think you're right to quite, I mean, it's a big amorphous target and these,
And like,
yeah,
when
some
do
of
we
these-
start doing that project? Do we have to have
We
all?
did the first phase already, and the second phase is being designed right now. So the capital projects fund has 3.9 million in it. Some of these other ones,
Our capital projects aren't even one.
what's that?
So that was at the beginning of the year. I'm assuming we spent some of that.
Yeah, we're actually budgeted to spend 1.2 million of that.
So we still have,
Quite a bit, but like I said, that was the money that I was setting aside though for office space savings. So we could, one way, we could take that 899,000 and instead of transferring it out of the general fund, we could just use the money that's already in there.
segregate some of these. Like if you're saving up for, because that office space is super important, like we're growing. Can we segregate that into a separate,
Well, it is kind of segregated. I mean, I use those line items to kind of segregate what my potential uses are. But we're not locked in. I mean, we set it aside for office space, but we could reallocate it to something else. We just have to, specify that in our budget.
need office space? That's important too.
Yeah. and
Chris,
so-
can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So if we figure in 800,000 in contingency, and then if the capital projects were paid out of savings or out of the capital projects fund, then we'd be left with about 300,000 shortfall. Am I getting that right?
How about that? And I think we could probably get rid of that just by getting rid of those airport positions, those airport deputy positions. Not the airport's position, but the deputy sheriffs
That we're not needing yet.
that go for the airport that, that's probably 250,000. How much is it, Renee, with salary amounts? The benefits side of public safety is very expensive.
Yeah, they have a higher retirement percentage.
But we also have, here we're showing that 3.5 million in economic development, but we took a lot of that out this year.
actually, so how did that fund balance get so big?
Which one?
Economic development. I mean, is that
So that
TRT
was
economic
from,
development or
in
something?
2020, there was COVID, and so we didn't advertise and we laid everybody off too.
Okay,
So can
this-
some of
this is
that
a-
money,
This is a fraction of TRT money. Then is that's what,
It's
Can it
all
be
PRT, pretty much.
but so that 3.5 million, that didn't get used this year, a lot of it,
2 million.
and it won't be used.
The 3.5, so we started off budgeting to pull out like 400-something thousand. Then we added 1.2 million to it. So we went up to like about 1.6 million we're budgeting to pull out of that this year. we need, we like to keep about $1 million in, because a lot of the travel council's bills come due before we get really any significant TRT. And so if you're gonna spend like spring advertising, you gotta spend a lot of money. So it's just like any business, you gotta have money in the bank to pay it before you get your revenue in to cover it. But,
Okay, so I guess I was confused. So that's the
And then-
entire non-mitigation part of the TRT fund surplus. then?
And it's
I
more
guess
realistically. like
these are
two
hard
hours.
numbers because this was December of 21, so it's like it doesn't.
Yeah, so
relate,
this
like, in my head
is,
what-
I mean, we didn't budget to really spend any of the general fund surplus this year, so that number, well, probably stay close to the same. Like I said, I haven't gone through the process of projecting where we're gonna end this year yet. And that's what I'm gonna start doing soon. And then I'll be able to kind of get an estimate of where I think this number will go up or down, I don't know, and it's been a weird year. The 3.5 million came, there was about 600,000 in the TRT fund balance before 2020. Then 2020 hit, and our TRT lags by like 2 months. So we were not collecting any TRT for the first half of the year at all because it was shut down. And then the second half of the year, they were saying, don't travel, like everybody don't travel. The state was saying that, CDC was saying that. So we didn't spend a lot of money in 2020 because of COVID. And then 2021, we got back rolling again, but then we brought in like, 45% more TRT than we budgeted because the 2021 blew up. So between underspending 2020 and then bringing in a lot more money than we expected in 2021, that fund surplus rose from like about 600,000 to 3.5 million.
Great, I feel like that gives us some flexibility on doing some of these things.
Yeah, and that's what we were just doing with, at the end of the economic development budgets, we were budgeting to pull more of that out and spend it. And we budgeted to pull out about 1.6 million this year. So this number will go down probably by about 1.6 million
More
by
like
the end of the year.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand the bigger numbers here, so the general fund balance, like, that isn't the expectation. This is money we've set aside for stormwater stuff. If we wanted to, we could. general
It's
fund
our,
balance
most of
starts.
that's already committed though. So we've got the Jackson Street Phase 2 project, which we have a big match on. We have the BRIC grant, which we have a match on, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities. And then what's the other acronym? For the other grant we got for stormwater.
This is mostly committed to projects that we're gonna have. So
Mostly, there might be a little bit left, but we already
and
committed.
There's
most
4
of that.
million, that's probably like D road funds that can only be spent on roads.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we just discussed this number, which is now closer to 2 million, but that's got the TRT restrictions on how it's spent. General fund capital, that's mostly money that's been put aside for office space was the idea, but again, that could be, we've heard, there's no restrictions on. Roads capital, that's different from the roads and bridges.
Yeah, I mean, they're similar. This is the roads department is, that's their operational fund surplus, and they usually transfer that over to their capital. So like, we have a general fund and then a general fund capital, and roads has the same thing.
Okay,
So they've got, this is their operational fund balance. and
but
then
both
this
both
is
of
their
those can only be
capital.
spent on things closely related.
Yeah, so mostly road projects, big road projects.
And then this one, is this also TRT related? Is rec trails recreation, or is that?
That's mostly, that's a combination of the savings for our paid path maintenance. And, we save up for that, and then
Okay,
it's,
so it's money that's been put aside for,
yeah, and then also for our match, or, we're some portion of the Spanish Valley Drive project, trail project, and other things. And so that's actually a big mishmash of a lot of different revenue streams.
yeah, but a lot of it's committed because we're already in the pipe of the Spanish Valley.
Yeah, but there's still gonna be, we're gonna transfer in some money this year for the responsible rec program. And it's not all gonna get spent. So part of their budget is rolling that money over. So about 300,000 of that is rolling over from 2022 into their budget.
So then I'm thinking about the general fund and what we want to do. The things that are most closely related are the 8.7 million in the general fund balance, plus this general fund capital, which is something we were hoping to spend on office space, but not locked into that yet.
Yeah, and I mean, to be safe, I should probably budget to transfer money from the general fund operations to general fund capital, so I don't go past the limit. But it's hard to know what that transfer is going to be until very near the end of the year, because I have to get a really good idea how we're going to close out the year. And trying to figure that out is a big job. It's like $70 million budget all across all things. So it's a lot of work to do that. But when I get to that point, then I'll have a rough idea of like if I need to do a transfer into capital projects, or we could just do one, because 8.7 million is more than we probably need for a rainy day fund.
So I guess another question, maybe this is more nebulous, but I've gotten the impression through the budget discussions that, over the past 2 years with COVID, we were getting a lot of really generous federal grants, a lot of really generous grants for funding the airport. And what's different this year is that those things are not.
Well, we had the ARPA grant, which was, we had 2 tranches of 2 years in a row, 947,000, and that was for lost revenue from 2020. Those are done. We have one more $1 million grant next year to cover airport operations and debt. If we don't get another one of those, then the general fund budget will go up by $1 million. And that would be a rude way. So that's why I'm trying to cut things back instead of just say, let's use the fund surplus, because I like to match our annual revenue to our annual obligations. I don't mind pulling money out of the bank if it's for one-time purchases, but if I like to match our annual obligations to our annual revenue, so we're moving along. And always, I mean, for me, I always want to improve the county's financial position, and we have, and so that's why I think it's important to make some cuts.
But I guess I'm trying to, that all makes sense, but then, there's also just sort of unforeseen fluctuations in our annual revenue. And I think one of the, you've emphasized the importance of just for cash flow purposes, having something in the economic development fund. And I think similarly, we can use the general fund to sort of average out. So instead of spending each year what we take in, we want to spend each year what we think the average is going to be over the next few years. And if there are one-time events that cause our revenue to go up or down a little bit, we can put money in or take money out of them.
Feel like our
So I'm
revenue,
just-
I mean, I'm a little afraid of the economy moving forward, but I'll say.
feel like our revenue increases match our COLA increases, just like that,
You
simply.
used to, not this time around, probably. Well, let me
Well,
take
our
a look.
sales tax is way up. I don't know what our property.
No,
tax is.
yeah, I mean, property taxes
Well,
stays the
when
same.
we say
but-
we expect a fairly big property tax increase with the commercial zone,
No, I mean, that's a big misnomer. Reassessments don't bring us any more money in at all.
you know?
The only thing that brings new property taxes is new construction. So when a reassessment occurs, so the way property taxes are calculated is you take the total taxable value and then the budgeted amount. You divide the budgeted amount by the total taxable value, and so that gives you your property tax rate. So if total taxable value goes up, it drives the rate down, and you still get what you budgeted for. It's not like sales tax. And so what happens in these big reassessments is that if you happen to be getting reassessed, you're paying a much higher proportion of the total than you were before. And the person that's 4 years in without getting reassessed is getting a heck of a good deal, and their taxes are going down. While they're
Which makes
theirs is
Makes
going up.
sense. I get what you're saying. I just also wonder when you have an inflation rate like we have and the property values like we have, like it becomes a pretty huge.
But we don't
uptick.
get
We
any
don't
more.
get, if all the property values in the county doubled, across the board, it wouldn't have changed.
We
Just
wouldn't get
the
1
rate would
cent
get
more.
cut in half and we would take the same amount of money.
Huh.
And what you left out is that it's not an inflation adjusted amount of money. There's no COLA or inflation built into those things.
You have
So
to change the budget basically.
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to keep up with inflation, we would have to do a property tax increase. We have to go through truth in taxation and raise our property tax budget, which
every
we've
year
only
we
done
keep up
once in
with
the last 16 years. Grant County has. The school district does it every year.
But-
Valley Fire did it. You know, there's always somebody raising property taxes, but it's usually not us.
But there has been a lot of new construction in
Yeah.
town. I don't know if Chris knows, like at what rate have our property tax?
Well, I can look at it, right, you know, if I switch back over to our. You can see what the new growth is, although 2020 is when we did our property tax increase, and before that it was 2006, and so. Let's see here. So. In 2019, you know, this was the big property tax increase that we did in 2020. Like I said, the last time I did one was 2006.
We can't see
So-
your screen.
Oh, dang it.
All right, I'm gonna run y'all.
All right, thanks.
saw this?
So I'm trying to go back a little bit before that. So like in 2017, it went from about 2.653 million up to, oh, sorry, this doesn't pull the audited amounts in, so I'm not gonna get accurate
It
numbers.
doesn't matter.
But anyway, it goes up a little bit with new growth, and the more new growth, like when people build new hotels or any kind of taxable infrastructure, that's new revenue to us, and our property taxing, the revenue does go up for that, but not for assessment. Reassessments don't have any effect on our revenue. It's complicated, you know, but it's just the way it is, and so.
Even though the dollars go up, that doesn't mean it goes up.
Well, the thing that happens, like I said, is that if you get reassessed, you're paying more, but everybody else in the county pays less.
Yeah, some people's property taxes are going down. this
Why
year.
never go down?
Well, that's because,
I look back
but
at
you
my-
have to look,
I've never seen that.
you have to look, you don't have, but it doesn't, because there's always an entity that is raising taxes. So if you were to look at like just one,
For the county that.
if you were to
less.
look at each individual line and
Yeah.
find a line that isn't going through a tax increase and track it, you'll see that it does go down every year after your,
Assess.
okay.
Yeah, like on my
Assessment.
tax bill, I confirmed that.
And then on the
taken into
assessment
account.
here, it goes. And so this year, you know, we're really getting caught up, I guess, on,
It's kind
I'm
of, it's a really
not-
messed up system.
well, I
Which
think
doesn't-
that
Yeah, it
there
seems
should
very
have been,
counterproductive.
you know, the problem is, you know, I think that there's just a lot of flack you get when you raise values too much, but the state requires those assessed values to be within 10% of market value. We got way out from that, and the state forced us.
Yeah, we did. We did get way. I told
And so
everybody.
if that had, you know, it could have been more incremental, but I don't want to.
But that doesn't help. So how do we, is there anything that the
So-
county does
so at
to
this
increase
point, this-
revenue?
So what?
So, you
He's
know,
trying to get them to zero out, like,
so for, you mean like, I mean, there's a variety of tactics that can be employed to balance the budget. I guess the question that we would have, you know, we want to make a recommendation to the commission today to adopt this tentative budget with instructions on how to balance it. And so what do you feel like you want those instructions to be?
So one idea, which I think Chris mentioned a while ago, was
Maybe you could help write a motion down or something, you know, or track. So we got to formulate a motion.
okay, so one thing that was on the table that Chris mentioned, I think explicitly mentioned, was pay for the capital stuff out of the existing capital budget. You know, tolerate a 800,000 shortfall because we think we are actually going to spend that, and then plan on taking 300 out of the fund, roughly 300,000 out of the fund balance.
No cuts.
I'm just, I wouldn't say that's what I was in favor of.
I was kind of in line, but I also would say, like, I would challenge some of the, like, if there is departments with more than a 10% increase, that we challenge them to really go back and see if they can cut their increases by a certain percentage.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because, I mean, if it, unless it's like a, well, you know, they need a new HVAC because it's 100 degrees in there, like that shouldn't even be.
So do you have a list of departments? So what are the departments you would estimate cuts?
Well, we could scroll through real quick and it's kind of obvious.
Can we make a list of anybody that's over,
The naughty ones.
not even naughty, like naughty is that's a judgy word. Like just a list of departments that are like,
Well,
oh,
I mean,
they tried to increase their budget by more than 10% or.
I mean, the sheriff's a big one.
So
They're going from a $4.136 million budget. Oh, it looks like it's actually not as bad. Maybe they cut some stuff out. So maybe that one's not so bad. But this is one where I can say we've got 2 positions that we don't need.
Which is about right now, 220.
But it's still, you know, a pretty significant increase. But a lot of that's probably the COLA. But I haven't really done my homework yet, but I just remember rolling through the budget and making mental notes of a bunch of requests that I felt were sort of discretionary, quite honestly, and you know, increases that, in my opinion, are not necessary.
okay, but if we're gonna make a motion, at least we need to know what those are.
Well,
Like
my
an-
suggestion would be to list out all the different things and say, or any combination of these.
So I would lean towards any department that is,
Unless you want to, unless you want to like zero out something specific. But,
So you're saying that for what we send to the commission, it just be a non-specific recommendation, look for X amount of savings.
well, I guess the question that I would ask you all is like, how much do you want to draw off the fund balance? Because we could do 800,000 and that's pretty much not drawing off the fund balance at all. Because we'll probably underspend the budget by that much. So anything over 800,000 would be legitimately drawing off the fund balance. And so do you want to dip into the fund balance?
well, I guess my
So-
question is, are we then moving that, $8 million fund balance or moving some of it to then be earmarked for storm drain issue?
Oh,
or
yeah,
the-
let me cover, I forgot to cover that real quick. I think we should talk about that. So right
'cause
now.
I
I
like
think-
that we have a slush fund, but like, are we moving it to utilize it for some of these major needs?
So we've been making a $400,000 contribution every year to stormwater.
Well, I would recommend us improving that for 80 million. That will take us so long, 40 years.
Well,
Plus
the part of
50
it
years
is,
to
yeah,
to pay
well,
for
part
that.
of it, I mean, it's kind of like everything in the kitchen sink though. And so there is a short list of priorities that's still a lot of money. But there's also sort of a certain capacity of projects that we can have going on all at once. So we have a project going on right now. We can maybe do 2. But, you know, there's only so many projects you can do at once. And so, but I am, you know, at this point, the $400,000 contribution to stormwater is in there.
That was my question.
And we could draw off the fund balance and send even more if we wanted. You know,
I would
Bill-
think if it's 300,000 or less, I'd be okay drawing off of the balance.
so part of it, you know, is the other question, do we want to use the capital projects fund balance to pay for capital projects? Or want
I feel like that literally makes sense in my head. We have the
in a
capital
way,
project.
it doesn't really, it's kind of the same money. It's all general fund money. General fund capital projects and the general fund operation balance are the
So you're
same.
saying rather than taking money out of general fund to put more in capital projects to fund the
Yeah.
$1 million of capital fund, of capital projects this year?
Well, I mean, my strategy generally is to like really look at all these requests and ask if they're absolutely necessary. You know, I always go to review possible cuts before I do it.
Okay, but it sounded like you're saying we're not ready at this meeting to look at specific.
No, but what we're doing is making a recommendation to what the commission's gonna do for future workshops. So, I mean, let me see if I can,
But is that recommendation if we look for $400,000 in cuts? Is that the?
well, I already kind of drafted something up because I need to get a packet together here before 5, and so we're running out of time for that, so I pre-drafted.
Well, the deadline's 5 o'clock today.
Well, it was 5 o'clock on Wednesday, so I'm way late.
Oh, this is just, okay.
So we're doing
that
really
packet.
good.
So let me see if I can find what I already kind of drafted as your recommendation. I just pre-drafted because I needed to get something going. So what I drafted was Grand County Budget Advisory Board has approved the submission of the tentative 2023 budget to the Grand County Commission with instructions to further refine the budget in November workshop sessions such that the budget draw from the general fund balance is no greater than 800,000. This may be accomplished by making department cuts, reducing the COLA percentage, allocating some of the capital projects fund balance to cover capital requests, or a combination of the above.
Okay,
Do you
so
like that?
Yeah.
Well, that leaves a lot of options on the table.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
like
don't
it.
know why we.
Let's make it
But-
super
but-
vague. We are, we have no role. Good job. I like
But
it.
I guess the question, is, do you want to raise that? I mean,
Well, it's just a recommendation.
I really struggle with us touching COLA too much.
I would be comfortable not adding that in the recommendation by the board.
Yeah, I'm really struggling. I think those are some of the things our county needs most of all. So I know I don't necessarily follow suit in that.
I would recommend leaving the options on the table. I do feel like the commission is able to take into account, and decide whether or not those are good options or not. But I think that it's one of our functions to present the options that are possible. And I do like the idea of our recommendation being to, to say, let's shoot for a balanced budget, which is basically taking contingency into account, not pulling more than 800,000, which is what Chris had written in there.
because to me, the reason why I make that mark is because it means that I know that we want to create the county's financial position. Even if we degrade it a little bit, it's not a big deal. I'm not saying it is, but I just, it's just in my nature to try to advance the county's financial position.
Would love if COLA was literally like the last thing looked at. Like I struggle with that because I think
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I have to bring up the COLA anyway, regardless of what you recommend as the budget officer.
With that said, I would make a motion as quoted by Chris Baird just moments ago.
I second it.
I guess that's on your list of things, using, paying for the small capital items out of our existing capital funds. That was one of the things on the table. And so that's because of the fungibility, that's pretty similar to.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I don't think it makes any difference whether you transfer it out of one fund and into the other, because the statutory limitations on that money is the same.
In that case, sure.
So there's a motion by Gabe, second by Kevin, right?
Sure.
Or second by Shady. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 6-0 with Mary McGann absent. The only other thing I just want to ask is, do you guys want to be a part of these budget workshops?
I'd like to.
Okay, so we'll do joint BAB commission meeting workshops then. That's all right. Commission, I guess. I mean, technically, we're doing the executive work of the preparation of the budget is an executive function, and after the tentative budget is approved, it kind of turns over to the legislative side, which is why it's going to commission. But I think it's a good idea to have these joint.
Yeah, I think for the workshop.
The only
Maybe
downside.
some
you
of
have
us
to
have
do
picks up some.
minutes for the- But you can just copy and paste the minutes from the
Can I go
commission.
just watch the workshop?
Gotcha.
My November's insane anyways. So.
So anyway, I guess let me know what your guys' availability will be, and I'll ping the commission too at the Tuesday meeting to try to figure out when to schedule these workshops. So if you can let me know what your availability is for November.
First week and the last week are awesome. The rest of it kind of sucks.
Okay.
So we won't have these Friday afternoon ones scheduled that'll morph into
We
that.
could, I mean, I need time. The first week's not gonna work for me because we're gonna approve the tentative budget, and I need time to gather myself again.
It's a lot, yeah, it's a lot.
So I'm thinking, yeah, and then we're supposed to have everything buttoned down for the public hearing to put this out 10 days before December 6th. So we are kind of looking at the second and third week.
My worst case, it's fine. I'll be here on Zoom.
Okay, all right. That's it. Then we'll close. It's 3:58 PM on October 28th. We're gonna close this session of budget advisory board. Thanks, guys.
Have a good weekend, guys.